Welcome to the Astrolabe. It is Friday. It is Valentine's Day. It is the day where you must dote upon your woman. You must make her happy. Give her the little things that make her happy. Even if they're not meaningful to you, they're meaningful to her. You know what they are. You better. You better know what your woman wants on Valentine's Day. All women are the same, but they're all different too. So there's a few common things that you could probably that are probably a safe bet, but you should know the specific thing that will put a smile on her face. She's working hard. She's putting up with you the whole year, and today is the day that you must reward her. Reward her with something tasty, with something sweet, something expensive, something beautiful. Many things that you could choose from. But you better choose right, because if you don't, you'll be in trouble. Happy Valentine's Day to the ladies out there. I know there's a couple of you that listen. Hopefully the man in your life did not let you down. I made sure that I didn't. I have done my duty. I skated by. I skated by the skin of my teeth. Let's see. What do we have here today? We're going to talk about. There's a bunch of things that we're going to talk about that I didn't even put in the title today. But the big one here is JD Vance's speech. We're going to listen to another JD Vance speech today. It'll be later on in the second half of the show. But he gave this speech at the Munich Security Conference that is just. It's a landmark speech. It is so significant. The Europeans, the poor Europors out there. They're all in a tizzy about it, and I think there's a lot that we can glean from it about the position, the posture of the administration. We're also going to read a couple of things from Unheard. One of them is about how YouTube forged the online right. We have done it. We'll get evidence of that. And then there's an interesting thing here about Donald Trump's economic master plan. He is plotting an anti-Nixon shock. This written by Yanis Varoufakis, a Greek leftist who actually is rather fair to the Don. It's actually a pretty good read. It's not super long, so we'll read that. And then I've got a very interesting thread on the biggest economic shift in 50 plus years happening right now. We're getting more and more signals out of the administration about how this great monetary reset is going to happen. So. But before we get to that, we got to go through a whole bunch of different little stories here. Lots of videos, lots of fun stuff. Do me a favor, hit the like button. If this is your first time watching and you haven't subscribed to the channel, then do me a favor and subscribe. I just went and looked at some of the analytics last night, and it looks like right now, I think 86% of views are coming from subscribers. So I need you guys to help me out. I need you guys to interact with the streams, help us game the algorithm. Leave me a comment in the live chat, send a super chat. Like the stream. Actually, you can even dislike the stream. As long as it's getting interaction, it works. And then, most of all, share the stream. Go share it with someone. Tell someone that they need to be listening to the Astrolabe. I keep having people reach out to me and tell me, Matt, your audience should be so much larger. And I say, yes, I know, but I can't do it all on my own. I need you guys to help. So, go out, share the stream. I'm streaming on X and on YouTube, and if you're new here, I do this almost every day, Monday to Friday. For the time being, there's going to be some major changes coming that I think you guys are really going to like. I'm not gonna tease anything specific just yet, but there's going to be some significant changes coming here soon, and we'll be branching out the scope of the content production a little bit in some ways you might not guess. So. Yes, do me a favor, interact with the stream, share it with someone, and then go subscribe to the King Pilled Substack. That's where I post after I finish doing the stream. I upload everything, and I drop all the links that I went through because I go through a lot of links throughout the Astrolabe here, and a lot of people want to know where they are. That's the place to find them. King Pilled Substack. You can also get them in the description of the podcast if you listen to this in podcast form. It's intended to be a visual show. I mean, I'm streaming video here and sharing my screen and everything. But if you just want to listen to the audio of it, then you're welcome to. Just know that I'm not necessarily tailoring this for the audio listener. But if you are consuming on your podcatcher of choice, then all the links are also down in the description. If you scroll down If you scroll down past the shilling at the top, then you'll get to the long list of links. All right, let's get it going. So, first one here. A well-funded music program. Ozzy Osbourne's Crazy Train, xylophone style. Look at these kids. I love that solo right in the middle here. Where was the kid? He nailed that syncopation really well right here. That's great. It's so good for kids to do this. I played the piano when I was a kid. I sang a lot. Learned how to play the guitar a little bit. Never really much there, but then played the cello and was in the choir in college or in high school. And it's so good for your brain. You absolutely got to get your kids playing instruments. A couple a super chat here. $20 super chat from Duffhead. What's up, Duffy? He says, get these engagement numbers up, Labians. There you go. You got your marching orders. Labians, engage. And then we got a membership chat here from Rob P. He's been a member for 1 month. Welcome, Rob. He says, interaction maxing. Hey, Mom, I got the solo and xylophone class. It's pretty awesome, though. Okay. Now, I'm about to touch your guys' souls. You're going to feel this one. Hey, son, what you listening to? Oh, nothing, just this song from some old game.
Isn't that crack?
Oh.
What is that crack?
You want to know something great about this clip, about this song? The way it affects you? That's how it affects our vice president. You know it. You know that he gets hit the exact same way. He knows the old lore. Yeah, Marty O'Donnell for the win. Okay, this one here. I played the little clip for you guys yesterday about the one expenditure that DOGE has uncovered at USAID that honestly is pretty justifiable. You know, I don't mind that one. Paying $3 million to a Gazan rapper to make anti-Semitic raps. Well, they found another one. This one here, also completely justified. The federal government spent $37 million last year keeping a 392-year-old Greenland shark alive. Look at this absolutely majestic creature. 400 years old. Honestly, I don't think they spent enough.
'Cause every time we touch, I get this feeling. And every time we kiss, I swear I could fly. Can't you feel my heart beat fast? I want this to last. Need you by my side. 'Cause every time we touch, I feel the static. And every time we kiss, I reach for the sky. Can't you hear my heart beat so I can't let you go?
I wonder what they spent $37 million on, because he just kind of, I think it's a she actually, just kind of floats there. But if DOGE cuts the 392-year-old Greenland shark budget, we riot. All right, guys. Paul Suda has returned with another recap. This one's for week 4. And there's so much that's happening now. This is a 10-minute recap, and you know what? We're going to watch all 10 minutes of it. I already did, and it's worth it. Of course it is. It's coming from Paul Suda. Shout out to this powerful mutual. Now regular on the show. As long as he produces these recaps, we're going to be pushing him out.
We're here today because we have filed charges against the state of New York. We have filed charges against Kathy Hochul. We have filed charges against Letitia James and Mark Schroeder, who is with DMV. This is a new DOJ, and we are taking steps to protect Americans, American citizens, and angel moms, like the mom standing right behind me, who you're going to hear from in a moment. New York has chosen to prioritize illegal aliens over American citizens. It stops today. And if you don't comply with federal law, we will hold you accountable. We did it to Illinois. Strike 1. Strike 2 is New York. And if you are a state not complying with federal law, you're next. Get ready.
Which White House official made the decision to bar the AP reporter from the Oval Office?
If we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable. And it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. And I'm not sure why news outlets don't want to call it that, but that is what it is.
He's got a wall around the Vatican, does he not? So he's got a wall around to protect his people and himself, but we can't have a wall around the United States. So I wish he'd stick to the Catholic Church and fix that and leave border enforcement out.
Take a deep breath for just a moment and ponder big balls.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
If you say that you're afraid of Trump and that's why you don't want the city to be a safe space for trans people, you better prepare for trans people to make this a very unsafe space.
I'm shaking right now. I don't want to be here. I'm sorry, am I taking too long pleading for my life?
You remembered how many children I have and that 2 of them are trans.
Oh, I'd like it to be closed immediately. Look, the Department of Education's a big con job.
The unelected power in this country is the rogue bureaucracy. USAID is unelected. The FBI, that persecuted President Trump for 8 years, is unelected. The CIA and those who have laundered intelligence to try to change the foreign policy of the United States are unelected. President Trump is restoring democracy by controlling the federal bureaucracy. There is one man in the country who is elected by the whole American people to implement an agenda they support. That is the president.
We are witnessing is a constitutional crisis. We are seeing an executive branch that has decided that they are no longer going to abide by the Constitution in honoring Congress's role.
The disruptor-in-chief, Elon Musk, who apparently has adopted the alias, at least he changed his social media handle to Harry Balls, tweeted this morning, "Democracy in America is being destroyed by judicial coup. An activist judge is not a real judge."
Trump's doing what he promised to do. You go back to April of 2017, it was just 46% of all Americans who said that Trump was doing what he promised to do. Compare that now to February of 2025. You know, there was a good show that was on during the 1990s called A Different World. That is what's going on right now. We're living in a different world. 70% of Americans say Trump is doing what he promised to do.
White supremacy is rampant in this country. Just look at the current administration and our own legislative body. They have contributed to the social and economic harms, to racial terror Black folks have experienced in this country.
They can disperse the monies that they were allocated within the law, within the confines of the law, and that the government does not have to seek pre-clearance from the courts on terminating funding as long as they have the authority to do it as governed by the applicable statutory, regulatory, or grant terms. So essentially, the court is confirming what the Trump administration has maintained and what common sense can project, which is that within the confines of regulatory and normal authority, of course, you can do what you want with your own money, and you don't need a court's approval to do so.
Any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops. If these troops are deployed as peacekeepers to Ukraine at any point, they should be deployed as part of a non-NATO mission, and they should not be covered under Article 5.
There's a coup happening in Washington, and one of the ways that stops is when people show up in massive numbers to protest against it. So if you want more information, hashtag 50501 or hashtag build the resistance will help you find what you need to know so that you can participate and take our country back from the Christian fascist oligarchs. Solidarity. See you out there.
What we're going to do is tomorrow I'm having a news conference. I'm going to read to you some of the names that hundreds of millions and even billions of dollars have been given to. And if you tell me that we should be giving money to those things, those entities, I think you'll probably have to leave as a reporter because you're not very talented. When you look at the kind of money, billions and billions of dollars being thrown away illegally, and there's no chance, I'm going to say it in front of our Attorney General, there's no chance that there's not kickbacks or something going on. When you give millions and millions of dollars to somebody that stands to look at something for 15 minutes and walks away with millions of dollars, That money's coming back in some form. And that's only one form of corruption. The biggest thing is what they do to our country. They're taking massive amounts of money and spending it on items. I went through a list of 200 expenditures that were made.
Waste is different from fraud. Fraud is different from abuse, and abuse is different from both. When we talk about improper payments, they are a subset of those other three categories. But that doesn't tell us the whole picture either. Sometimes improper payments are a function of bad record keeping. Sometimes they are a function of outdated information technology systems. Sometimes they come about through human error, and sometimes they come about through negligence. There are a variety of reasons why improper payments happen. It just simply is not the case that improper payments are only a function of bad people doing bad things with bad intent.
Before it was Elon Musk making our government efficient and accountable, it was some unnamed bureaucrat that none of you knew. Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. He's also now one of the most highly scrutinized men in the world alongside President Trump because of what he's doing and the access that he is allowing. So there's great transparency. As for the actual receipts, we are happy to provide them, and I actually brought some today because all of you know I love to bring the receipts. We have contracts upon contracts that we can send and provide this information to you. Let me be very clear. We are not trying to hide anything. We have been incredibly transparent, and we will continue to be. These are screenshots of contracts that DOGE found across our government. This is a DEI contract, $36,000 for U.S. citizenship and immigration services. That is against the president's policies and his America First agenda. This is a $3.4 million contract, a Council for Inclusive Innovation at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, Department of Commerce, another DEI contract that DOGE identified.
You know, there's crazy things like we just cursory examination of Social Security, and we've got people in there that are 150 years old. Now, do you know anyone who's 150? I don't know. Okay. They should be on the Guinness Book of World Records. They're missing out. So, you know, that's a case where, like, I think they're probably dead. It's my guess. Or they should be very famous. One of the two.
A banger! Go follow Paul Suda. You guys ready to feel like Americans? This video made me feel as American as I ever have felt. Oh, that's so freaking cool. Okay, hold on just a second. I just remembered that there was a another clip that I was going to play with that one, and I forgot to pull it up. But I think I know where I can find it quickly. Yes. This right here is the new NASA administrator, Jared Isaacman. He says, busy with Shift 4 transition and prepping for confirmation, but made time to fly a St. Jude supporter today. Can't comment on space, but eager to earn the Senate's trust. If confirmed, I'll work tirelessly with the brightest minds at the greatest space agency to deliver on the president's vision. The second space age is just beginning. This is our NASA administrator. Now, I must offer an obligatory. However, we've already proven that we can have one. Maybe we can have two. I don't know. Do you think? Can we have two? If this is number two, what a time to live in, man. And look at our SecDef. Kicked off the day working out with my troops from V Corps. Tough, disciplined, ready to fight. Look at him. We've gone from having a bunch of like stuffy eggheads in dopey looking suits to this as a Secretary of Defense. I can't even imagine what the actual rank and file, like how they actually feel about this. I mean, out here doing PT with the boys. I don't care if this is just a photo op. The optics of this are just off the charts. Doing push-ups in the snow. Push-ups in the Polish snow. Got the gray fox thing going on. Man. Silver fox, I think it actually is the term. Readiness starts with physical and mental toughness.
I'm with the rotational unit here, first cap.
Imagine being these dudes and getting to get up in the morning and go out and do PT with the SecDef. Incredible things happening. And Clay Martin here says, I'm enjoying the rise of the Zoomers more than I ever thought possible. Tom Homan gave the Border Patrol Instagram account to some Zoomer, and he's been gymming out ever since. Look at this.
Only thing that's on my mind is who's gonna run this town tonight. We gonna run this town.
there is no question that we've got one of our guys running the Instagram account. I mean, I honestly, I kind of feel for the libs a little bit sometimes when I stop and think about it, because Whiplash is a bitch. And they've gone from the most, I don't know if there's ever been a sharper transition. Like if you could go from Border Patrol social media presence on January 19th to Border Patrol social media presence on January 21st. It's the most, it's got to just be the most jarring thing in the world for them. This administration really is going to be. It goes back to what I was what Cooper and I talked about. I don't know, about a year or so ago. We're talking about how we're entering this time where the as the boomers are beginning to die off. Like this is the last boomer president we're ever going to have, and he is singular among the boomers. But now is the time for Gen X, and you're going to get a you're going to get the Gen X head on the Gen Z body is what's coming out now. Millennials are going to be kind of sprinkled in and around there, but I think ultimately the millennials are going to be kind of I think an overlooked generation. I think it's going to go, the boomers stayed on for forever. We're going to get a brief Gen X period, and then it's going to be Zoomer occupied government for a long time. So it's just the Zoomer generation has been completely redefined just with the DOGE project. I tweeted this out the other day that I think just in a couple of weeks of us, the story of the DOGE project, it is completely reframed what Zoomer means, from to where people are no longer going to have it's going to linger a bit, but people aren't going to by default think Zoomer and think like, I don't know, like useless, degenerate, nihilist child, which is kind of how a lot of people, I think, unfairly think of the Zoomers. Same thing has kind of happened with the millennials as well. I have a tweet that's been just racking up interactions for a while now. Kurt Schlichter said something about how, what was it? Orrin McIntyre said that he said something about the Zoomers and how these guys have existed out here, and then you've got the conservative influencers who are saying you need to go work at Panda Express or Carl's Jr. or whatever. And Kurt Schlichter's like, oh, well, I actually had a great time. It was one of my early jobs. It's great for people when they're at the start of their career to work some job like that. And I'm like, dude, millennials and Zoomers are not at the start of their career, especially millennials. There are some Zoomers who are, but there are millennials who have children in college. Millennials are in their 30s and 40s. They're not at the start of their career, but the term millennial has become synonymous with, in the older generations, with like spoiled teenager. Because there was a time, 25 years ago or whatever, that millennials were teenagers. And there was and they were helicopter parented. So like we had participation trophies shoved on us, and then became defined as the participation trophy generation, whatever. And we never wanted them in the first place. It was the frickin' boomers and old Gen Xers who were giving out the participation trophies. We didn't want them. But now millennial has become synonymous for people, instead of being synonymous with the generation of people, which changes as it gets older. I mean, boomer comes from baby boomer, like it's defining them as like when they're born. It's this generation of new birth. And now boomer is stuck in the mud old person who's held on their positions of power and influence for way too long. The generation moves. This is kind of like how time works. So millennials are no longer teenagers. A lot of Zoomers are no longer teenagers. Some Zoomers are pushing 30. And yet the older generations are just stuck thinking about millennials and Zoomers as being children. Which is it's tied into so many different distortions in social structures. Because these older generations they've been some of the most incompetent, particularly the boomers. Gen X, some of the older Gen X ones aren't much better, but they've been some of the most incompetent leaders, innovators, visionaries of all time as a generation. And of course, there's individual exceptions to the rule. But generally speaking, the boomer generation has become synonymous with everything that's retarded about the world today. And yet it's the millennials and the zoomers that largely have to bear all of that weight. Anyways, rant over. RFK has been confirmed and sworn in. This is part of this speech that he gave yesterday. It was very good.
For 20 years, I've gotten up every morning on my knees and prayed that God would put me in a position where I can end the childhood chronic disease epidemic in this country. On August 23rd of last year, God sent me President Trump. All right. And he gave me... He's now given me, he's kept every promise that he's made to me. He's kept his word in every account and gone way beyond it. I'm so grateful to you, Mr. President. A lot of people told me that I couldn't trust President Trump. I better get it in writing. And we did a handshake, and everything that he told me he was going to do, he has done. Right. And I'm so grateful to him, and I've told you before, I genuinely believe that you are a pivotal historical figure, and you are going to transform this country.
Someone said something about how the social media presence for this administration has been just absolutely phenomenal across the board. And they have nailed the optics in general, beyond just social media. They have nailed the optics of diplomacy and like proper deference between different figures. One example that comes to mind immediately was when JD Vance wrote that he thinks that DOGE staffer should be rehired. And they asked Trump about it, and Trump was just like, well, if the vice president said that, then I've got his back. Perfect. That's exactly... He knows how to be the center figure, but also be magnanimous with everyone around him. And then each of his nominees have all been appropriately deferential to him. And they've gone out of their way to express their gratitude for him. And basically, when the king appoints you to a position, you get that position, it's proper for you to publicly display fealty to the king. And here's another clip.
I genuinely believe that you are a pivotal historical figure, and you are going to transform this country at a time when we see all of the indicia of democracy now in tatters in our country. We see the rise of the military-industrial complex, the rise of totalitarianism, these attacks on our Constitution, and this breathtaking epidemic that is disabling our people. President Trump has promised to restore the American dream in this country. A healthy person has 1,000 dreams. A sick person only has one. 60% of our population has only one dream.
A healthy person has 1,000 dreams. A sick person only has one. That's a bar. Also notice he said all the indicia of democracy. We've got a word cell in HHS, folks.
As they get better. President Trump has promised that he's going to restore America's strength. But we can't be a strong nation if we have a weak citizenry. If people are sick, 60% of our people are sick, 77%, as President Trump mentioned, our children cannot qualify for military service. And we need a man on a white horse now. We need somebody who is willing to come in and has the spine and the guts and the strength to challenge orthodoxies, to stand in the way of vested interests, and to break institutions that have turned against our democracy. President Trump has shown again and again that he is that hero.
TC says, I still contend that boomers, at least young boomers, are extremely generous and awesome people. Yes, absolutely. Within the boomer generation are some individually great people. But as a collective, the generation as a collective, it's possible for you to have a difference here where you have a bunch of individual people who are great, and then a collection of people that together are just awful. And as we've talked at length in the show before, I'll give the necessary qualifications. We've talked about how the boomers themselves got a raw deal, and you could just keep playing this game back further and further and further. So it's not anything to get hung up about, but you know, occasionally you got to rant a little. Okay, so right after his swearing in yesterday, right after RFK's swearing in yesterday, Trump issued another executive order establishing the president's Make America Healthy Again Commission. I'm going to read through this because this is better than I could have hoped for, honestly. I never in my life thought that we would see a presidential administration that would start thinking about health in this way and devoting resources toward health in this way. So it says, by the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and laws of the United States of America, it's hereby ordered, American life expectancy significantly lags behind other developed countries, with pre-COVID-19 United States life expectancy averaging 78.8 years and comparable countries averaging 82.6 years. This equates to 1.25 billion fewer life years for the United States population. 6 in 10 Americans have at least one chronic disease, and 4 in 10 have 2 or more chronic diseases. An estimated 1 in 5 United States adults lives with a mental illness. These realities became even more painful when contrasted with nations around the globe. Across 204 countries and territories, the United States had the highest age-standardized incidence rate of cancer in 2021, nearly double the next highest rate. Further, from 1990 to 2021, the United States experienced an 88% increase in cancer, the largest percentage increase of any country evaluated. In 2021, asthma was more than twice as common in the United States as most of Europe, Asia, or Africa. Autism spectrum disorders had the highest prevalence in high-income countries, including the United States, in 2021. That's a very interesting statistic. Autism spectrum disorders had the highest prevalence in high-income countries. Similarly, autoimmune diseases such as inflammatory bowel disease, psoriasis, and multiple sclerosis are more commonly diagnosed in high-income areas such as Europe and North America. Overall, the global comparison data demonstrates that the health of Americans is on an alarming trajectory that requires immediate action. This concern applies urgently to America's children. In 2022, an estimated 30 million children, or 40.7%, had at least one health condition, such as allergies, asthma, or an autoimmune disease. It's just staggering. 41% of children had at least one health condition. And note this here. What was the date? 1990 to 2021. So what we're reading right here is the boomers' legacy. Sometimes we can be kind to the boomers. Sometimes we got to be harsh with the boomers. This is a harsh truth that all of this that's being described here, the health condition of America, is part of the boomers' legacy, because all of the things that have contributed to this have taken place under their watch. Autism spectrum disorder now affects 1 in 36 children in the United States, a staggering increase from rates of 1 to 4 out of 10,000 children identified with the condition during the 1980s. So in 40 years, it's gone from 1 to 4 out of 10,000 to 1 in 36. 18% of late adolescents and young adults have fatty liver disease, close to 30% of adolescents are pre-diabetic, and more than 40% of adolescents are overweight or obese. These health burdens have continued to increase alongside the increased prescription of medication. For example, in the case of attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, over 3.4 million children are now on medication for the disorder, up from 3.2 million children in 2019 and 2020. And the number of children being diagnosed with the condition continues to rise. This has always just been, it's blown my mind that people can just, they just think it's normal to take kids and give them meth. Like, oh, that kid, that 12-year-old kid who's really like fidgety and has a hard time concentrating while he's sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day. Oh, the solution is we just need to give him meth. He's broken, you see, and the solution to it, his solution is meth. That's what will make him not broken. Not like, hey, maybe we shouldn't take young kids and just cram them into a school setting and make them just sit there and behave all day. Like they need to be active and doing stuff and building and creating. Maximize on the time when they have the most energy and the most neuroplasticity for developing great habits. No. Just give them meth. That'll do it. This poses a dire threat to the American people and our way of life. 77% of young adults do not qualify for the military based in large part on their health scores. 90% of the nation's $4.5 trillion in annual healthcare expenditures is for people with chronic and mental health conditions. In short, Americans of all ages are becoming sicker, beset by illnesses that our medical system is not addressing effectively. These trends harm us, our economy, and our security. To fully address the growing health crisis in America, we must redirect our national focus in the public and private sectors toward understanding and drastically lowering chronic disease rates and ending childhood chronic disease. This includes fresh thinking on nutrition, physical activity, healthy lifestyles, over-reliance on medication and treatments, the effects of new technological habits, environmental impacts, and food and drug quality and safety. We must restore the integrity of the scientific process by protecting expert recommendations from inappropriate influence and increasing transparency regarding existing data. We must ensure our healthcare system promotes health rather than just managing disease. It shall be the policy of the federal government to aggressively combat the critical health challenges facing our citizens, including the rising rates of mental health disorders, obesity, diabetes, and other chronic diseases. To do so, executive departments and agencies that address health or healthcare must focus on reversing chronic disease. Under this policy, first, all federally funded health research should empower Americans through transparency and open source data. There's a little buzzword, open source, and should avoid or eliminate conflicts of interest that skew outcomes and perpetuate distrust. Number two, the National Institutes of Health and other health-related research funded by the federal government should prioritize gold standard research on the root causes of why Americans are getting sick. Number three, agencies shall work with farmers to ensure that United States food is the healthiest, most abundant, and most affordable in the world. And number four, agencies shall ensure the availability of expanded treatment options and the flexibility for health insurance coverage to provide benefits that support beneficial lifestyle changes and disease prevention. So expanded treatment options and flexibility for health insurance coverage to provide benefits that support beneficial lifestyle changes and disease prevention. So within these points here, you've got, let's see here, eliminate or avoid conflicts of interest that skew outcomes and perpetuate distrust. This is going directly at all of the NGO-funded science capital S science trademarked. The what was the other one? This is agricultural regulatory capture with agriculture, and then this one here is the insurance markets. So you've got like healthcare advertising and the funding of drugs and the funding of drugs by the people who are selling the funding of research by the people who are selling the drug, and then ads that are funded by the same people, and the way that's integrated with the media. Mainstream media exists, so-called mainstream media exists because of advertisements for drug companies. Take away those advertisements and they can no longer exist the way that they do. So this is not just like a token executive order. All these points here are shots across the bow at some of the deepest, most corrupt, moneyed interests in the country and outside the country. Section 3, establishment and composition of the President's Make America Healthy Again Commission. There is hereby established the President's Make America Healthy Again Commission, chaired by the Secretary of Health and Human Services, so RFK, with the assistant to the assistant to the President for domestic policy, serving as executive director. This is Vance is the assistant to the President for domestic policy. In addition to the chair and the executive director, the commission shall include the following officials or their designees: secretaries of Agriculture, HUD, Education, VA, EPA, OMB, Assistant to the President and Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, Director of the National Economic Council, Chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, Commissioner of Food and Drugs, Director for the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, Director of the NIH, and other members of my administration invited to participate at the discretion of the Chair and the Executive Director. So this commission is going to cover the reason that you would appoint all of these people to this commission is because the things that commission is going to be focused on implicates all of these different agencies. Not just the health-focused agencies. You've also got National Economic Council, Council of Economic Advisors. You've got OMB, you've got EPA, you got VA, HUD, fighting childhood chronic disease. The initial mission of the commission shall be to advise and assist the president on how best to exercise his authority to address the childhood chronic disease crisis. Therefore, the commission shall, A, study the scope of the childhood chronic disease crisis and any potential contributing causes, including the American diet. These are very interesting things that are mentioned specifically here. The American diet, absorption of toxic material, medical treatments, lifestyle, environmental factors, government policies, food production techniques, electromagnetic radiation, and corporate influence or cronyism. This is incredibly thorough. I can't really think of anything else that I would add to this. Not off the top of my head. I'm sure we might be able to come up with something, but this is very broad ranging, which goes back to why all of these people are going to be part of this commission. B, advise and assist the president on informing the American people regarding the childhood chronic disease crisis using transparent and clear facts. And C, provide to the president government-wide recommendations on policy and strategy related to addressing the identified contributing causes of and ending the childhood chronic disease crisis. The initial assessment and strategy for the Make America Healthy Again Commission. A, Make Our Children Healthy Again assessment. Within 100 days of the date of this order, the commission shall submit to the president, through the chair and the executive director, the Make Our Children Healthy Again assessment. The MOCA assessment, which shall first identify and describe childhood chronic disease in America compared to other countries. So identify the problem. Number 2, assess the threat that potential overutilization of medication, certain food ingredients, certain chemicals, and certain other exposures pose to children with respect to chronic inflammation or other established mechanisms of disease using rigorous and transparent data, including international comparisons. Number 3, assess the prevalence of and threat posed by the prescription of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, stimulants, and weight loss drugs. The prevalence of and threat posed by the prescription of SSRIs, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, stimulants, and weight loss drugs. I included stimulants, so but all the rest of these. Identify and report on best practices for preventing childhood health issues, including through proper nutrition and the promotion of healthy lifestyles. Evaluate the effectiveness of existing educational programs with regard to nutrition, physical activity, and mental health for children. Identify and evaluate existing federal programs and funding intended to prevent and treat childhood health issues for their scope and effectiveness. Ensure transparency of all current data and unpublished analyses related to the childhood chronic disease crisis consistent with applicable law. Evaluate the effectiveness of current federal government childhood health data and metrics, including those from the Federal Interagency Forum on Child and Family Statistics and the National Survey of Children's Health. Restore the integrity of science, including by eliminating undue industry influence, releasing findings and underlying data to the maximum extent permitted under applicable law, and increasing methodological rigor. And establish a framework for transparency and ethics review in industry-funded projects. Then there's the Make Our Children Healthy Again strategy. So the MOCAs. Within 180 days of the date of this order, so within 6 months, the commission shall submit to the president, through the chair and executive order, a Make Our Children Healthy Again strategy based on the findings from the Make Our Children Healthy Again assessment described in subsection A. The strategy shall address appropriately restructuring the federal government's response to the childhood chronic disease crisis, including by ending federal practices that exacerbate the health crisis or unsuccessfully attempt to address it, and by adding powerful new solutions that will end childhood chronic disease. I can just imagine they're running the text of this executive order by Trump, and he said, no, you got to put powerful in there. Powerful new solutions. The chair, so RFK, may hold public hearings, meetings, roundtables, and similar events as appropriate, and may receive expert input from leaders in public health and government accountability. Following the submission to the president of the strategy and any final strategy reports thereafter, the chair and the executive director shall recommend to the president updates to the commission's mission, including desired reports. They shall not reconvene following submission of the strategy until an updated mission is submitted to the president through the executive director. And then just some covering legal bases at the end there. So this strikes me as effectively giving RFK full reign to go absolutely ham. Now, everything has to be brought back to the president. The president's going to have to sign off on anything. But I can understand why RFK is so happy and so grateful to Trump. And this is pretty significant because Trump could have fairly easily gotten his endorsement, brought him on board, and then been like, here, we'll give you some little niche thing over here that you can go fart around with. But no, he's giving him a broad mandate to go after a whole bunch of different industries. This is one of the things within the administration that I'm most optimistic about in terms of the actual success, like penetration and sustainability of the changes that are going to be made here. $10 super chat from Slosher. He says, in The Sopranos, the school wanted to give Tony's kid ADHD medication. It was supposed to make Tony look ignorant, but he hit the nail on the head. He's 13. He has a hard-on every 15 minutes. Yes, right. So much of the childhood disease epidemic is from children just simply not being allowed to be children. It's downstream from the helicopter parenting, and the excessive longhousing from the 80s and 90s with the you had like Mothers Against Drunk Driving. You had the putting the warning labels on what's it called, on like the content warnings on like CDs, and there's all this concern about violent video games and all of this. Really, that hysteria created a world in which kids are simply not allowed to be kids anymore. They're not allowed to get hurt. They're not allowed to do dangerous things. They're not allowed to go run around in the dirt and inoculate themselves. We have to give them lots of drugs and constrain their behavior and force them into environments with shitty lighting and shove a screen in front of their face. All of this stuff is all born out of the Longhouse, really. Yeah, brought to you by Tipper Gore. Yeah. What that commission did not cover, perhaps the most significant part of RFK Jr.'s mandate, is, like Elon Musk, RFK Jr. is going to assemble a team of 19 to 24-year-olds to follow fat people around and do this all day.
All right! Enough! Stop it! Stop! All right! Enough! Stop it!
See, Zoomers, you're going to get jobs. You're going to get jobs you can enjoy. Now, right after his nomination, or right after his swearing in, RFK has made one of his first big announcements.
This profile is for these products.
Do you think the COVID vaccine was safe and the boosters were safe? I mean, a lot of people talk about adverse effects.
We don't have good data on it, and that is a crime. The fact that we don't have a surveillance system that actually works. In 2010, CDC has a surveillance system called the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. And it's supposed to pick up injuries. But CDC did a study of that system in 2010. And that study said, and this is a published study by CDC, that it captures less than 1% of the vaccine injuries. That's inexcusable. Congress has repeatedly, and the Institute of Medicine, the National Academy of Sciences, have repeatedly ordered CDC to put together a better vaccine.
Will you require it?
And we will do that right away.
There's rumors out there that as many as 50% of the employees of HHS will be cut in the restructuring of government that DOGE is helping President Trump carry out. and people are wringing their hands. Your response to that?
I don't know anything about 50% of people being cut. There's 90,000 employees.
So a new vaccine injury report system. Things have changed so quickly on this front. I would have been afraid to play that clip not too long ago. Even now, I'm a little like, ugh, hopefully I don't get myself in trouble playing that on here. But very subtly, a few of us were talking about this a couple of months ago, but very subtly, we started noticing that things were relaxing with the algorithm. You're able to get away with saying more and more. And to this date, I've never had, that I can remember, I don't think I've ever had anything taken down on YouTube because of like content, like objectionable content. I've had copyright claims that have taken stuff down, but one of the funniest ones was I recorded a video. Actually, I didn't even record it. Maybe 5 years ago, Amy was working with a client and needed to screen capture something and send him a video that he could watch so he could understand how to use a software system and where to find his information and everything. And he was super boomer tech, couldn't figure out how to do anything. She tried sending him looms and he couldn't figure out how to open the loom. So she wound up recording. He knew how to use YouTube. So she wound up recording a video and I uploaded it as just a private video on my YouTube account, and she sent it to him. And I completely forgot that it was there. Maybe a month ago, I got a notification that they had taken the video down. It was private. It was still private. Nobody had ever seen it. It had like 2 views on it. One from when I checked it to make sure it worked, and one when the guy watched it. They took it down because it had private information on it, because his email address was visible in the video. But otherwise, I've never had anything taken down. And I mean, you guys, if you watch the show, I don't hold back on a lot. It's the vaccine stuff is what I've been the most careful with, because that's what they've been the most aggressive about. But the vibe has shifted so much that it seems like a lot of this stuff is now, I mean, it's on Fox. It's the actual HHS secretary talking about this stuff on Fox. You can't get more newsworthy than that. Taking it down is insane. And here's another one.
This first executive order, it prohibits federal funding for COVID-19 mandates, vaccine mandates in schools.
Okay, and that will meaning they want to clear that up,
Yep.
the discrepancy.
So any schools that require students to be vaccinated with COVID-19 shot, then there's no more federal funding. So.
Okay.
She was not prepared to answer questions on it.
Okay, that solves that problem.
This first executive.
Now, I'd like to see this extend beyond just COVID-19 vaccines. They haven't posted the text of this executive order yet. Once they do, I'm going to read through it and see how they're defining this, because it could wind up being just a completely hollow, okay, so mandate anything that's not a COVID-19 vaccine, however you define that. However, just symbolically, this is a big move. As is this one, U.S. Army posted today that U.S. Army soldiers who were separated due to COVID vaccine refusal are welcome to return. You can still be all you can be with back pay. Watch this space for details. In the meantime, hit the gym. So the Department of Defense is preparing an invitation to bring back troops separated for refusing COVID vaccine. And with back pay is a big deal. Think about how much back pay that could potentially be hitting these guys' bank accounts right at the time when I'm sure they really need it. Okay, this video here. Once again, the administration is very responsive to the base. Somebody picked out in a video yesterday, in the background, you could see this posted right outside the Oval Office. Everybody started talking about it, and here you have Dan Scavino, who goes and takes a video of it so you could see it clearly. Look at that. Whenever you walk into the Oval, you got to walk right past his mugshot picture. Okay, now I've got a couple of clips here that are... President is just the funniest human being alive.
Raising anti-India voice, calling about separation, terrorism activities in India. Do you think that should continue here in the US as well?
You're going to have to go louder.
Mr. President, people in India would be welcoming your decision to extradite Tahabur Rana to...
I can't understand a word he's saying.
May I? May I, sir?
Go ahead, Ben.
One of us. And then this one here. Owen Benjamin shared this and said, needing a translator for Ajit speaking English is amazing. Welcome to the world of people who have to work for a living and call customer service about their own bills. No one knows what the fuck they're saying, and it isn't our job to learn diarrhea English. You have to speak clearly or you can head on back to Poop Town to get eaten by a tiger.
Say about the Bangladesh issue, because we saw and it is evident that how the deep state of United States was involved to regime change during the Biden administration. Then Muhammad Yunus made Junior Soros also. So what is your point of view about the Bangladesh?
And what is the role that the deep state played in the situation in Bangladesh?
Well, there was no role for our deep state. It was. This is something that the Prime Minister has been working on for a long time and has been worked on for hundreds of years, frankly. I've been reading about it. But I will leave Bangladesh to the Prime Minister.
Say about
the dude's speaking English and he still needs a translator. And then there's this one here. This one popped across my desk just before we went live, so I tossed it into the stack.
Yeah, please.
You mentioned auto tariffs the other day.
Yeah.
When do you plan to unroll?
Howard, I'd say over the next sometime, or maybe around April 2nd. I would have done them on April 1st. Believe it or not, I'm a little superstitious. No, literally, we had it planned for April 1st. I said, let's make it April 2nd. You know how much money that costs? That costs a lot of money just that one day, but we're going to do it on April 2nd, I think. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
April 2nd. Didn't want to do it on April 1st. He's a little superstitious. So, according to the New York Times, the IRS is about to lay off thousands of workers. And along with this, remember that what's her name? DHS. Kristi Noem sent a letter to Scott Bessent at the Treasury just recently and requested that he release a bunch of IRS agents for them to use to deputize for Border Patrol efforts. So you're going to get a bunch of IRS agents that are sent to work for Border Patrol, and they're going to lay off a whole bunch. So there's not going to be very many left. And if you recall, when I first went through the executive order dump right after the inauguration, the one that instructed was the federal hiring freeze across a bunch of different agencies. It said the freeze was going to be for 90 days, except for the IRS. The IRS was indefinite until and unless Scott Bessent and Russ Vogt together decide to lift the freeze on the IRS. So there's so many indicators here that the IRS is going away. The IRS is going away because the income tax is going away. Our country is not going to be funded off the backs of plundering American citizens. It's going to be funded off the backs of plundering non-Americans. We'll get to more on that here in just a little bit, but I got a couple more miscellaneous things to get through first. So, Washington, D.C. searches soar for Swiss bank, offshore bank, wire money, and IBAN. And as Marty Bent pointed out, the D.C. parasites don't even know how to use VPNs. So they're out here searching. How can we wire money to offshore banks? Recall that criminal defense attorney is also, the searches in the DC area for criminal defense attorney are also like 4 times what they are anywhere else in the country. They don't even know how to use a frickin' VPN. He says, can't imagine how sloppy their management of the data associated with their corruption is. The DOGE autists are going to get everything. Everyone assumed that this was the deep state was this super sophisticated network of the most clever, devious people on the planet. And it's completely insurmountable. No, it's a whole bunch of retarded people who assumed that their grift was just going to continue forever and ever and ever. And the longer that it went on, the more they were like, oh, whatever, who cares? No one's coming for us. And they're individually incredibly stupid. You've listened to these people talk. We've played the videos of them. They're some of the most unimpressive people in the world. Low-skilled, unintelligent. It's just that nobody ever went after them. Nobody ever tried to hold them accountable. And now, we've got people who are holding them accountable. And public will for holding them accountable is growing. It's not as high as it's going to be. It's going to be much higher. But it's growing. So these aren't like a whole network of millions of James Bonds. These are a bunch of incompetent buffoons who only speak this world and have zero awareness of the outside world and have never felt like they are ever at any risk of needing to be competent or protect their interests through any sort of cleverness. They're not even capable of that sort of cleverness. Like the thing with the EPA. The dude, they're like, oh, we're gonna shove all this money into this bank as quickly as possible to protect it from the administration so that we could keep our grift going under the auspices of green energy or whatever. And then the dude goes and on a date and just blabs about the whole thing. Yeah, we're trying to illegally shovel out as much money as we possibly can. These are stupid people. And anybody who ever tried to convince you that they were insurmountable or that they were to be feared, that there was no way anybody could ever do anything against them, they were just always going to be one step ahead. They're so clever, they're so devious. It turns out worshiping Satan makes you a retard. New homes for sale is absolutely exploding in DC. Everything is new. Liz Churchill says the lack of USAID money is collapsing the DC area real estate market. The politicians were stealing taxpayer money through USAID to fund their lavish lifestyles. That's exactly what was going on. All of these people were living these lavish lifestyles off of stolen taxpayer money. They were rigging elections. They were funneling money back to themselves. And they were voting 100% Democrat. These are incompetent, evil people. They must be flushed out. You know who's responsible for flushing them out? Our guy, Tom Homan. Listen to this.
Anymore.
But Tom, you got AOC out there, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman, putting out a webinar, doing a webinar to help illegals avoid, I guess, apprehension, giving tips about how to continue to remain in the country and ultimately game the system.
And I sent an email today to the Deputy Attorney General. At what level is that impediment? Is that impediment? I'm not an attorney. I'm not a prosecutor. Is that impediment? Is that impeding our law enforcement efforts? If so, what are we going to do about it? Is she crossing the line? So I'm working with the Department of Justice and finding out where is that line that they cross. So maybe AOC is going to be in trouble now, but I need the AOG to opine on that. But because there's impediment is impediment, in my opinion. I'm not a prosecutor, but we need some further guidance on that. But again, if we have to take every federal dollar out of the city, we'll do it. I mean, we're done. This is anymore.
Recall the Deputy Attorney General, who he emailed about prosecuting AOC, is Emile Beauvais. who I read you the letter that he wrote yesterday to the laying down the law for the Manhattan U.S. attorney, who he extracted a resignation from. And let me pull this tweet up here. I tweeted this earlier. Well, first of all, Douglas Mackey said, rumor, DOJ about to clear the deck at Public Integrity. This just keeps getting better and better. Valentine's Day Massacre. And for context, Public Integrity is the same outfit that brought the case against Douglas Mackey. The Public Integrity section has been infused with partisan animus. It's believed by many people on the bench and bar that there is political motivation. This is like the public corruption sector. Leslie McAdoo Gordon said, just so you know, the Public Integrity section at DOJ is the one that is staffed with the absolutely most obnoxious, self-righteous, Havertesque blockheads that there are at justice. This is the Justice Department's top election crimes prosecutor resigned Monday in protest after Attorney General William Barr told federal prosecutors that they should examine allegations of voting irregularities before states move to certify results in the coming weeks. So this is Public Integrity. And here's what's happening. Harry Littman posts on Blue Sky, strong rumor with credible sourcing. DOJ has put all of Public Integrity line attorneys in a room and told them they have an hour for somebody to choose who will sign the motion to dismiss. This is for Eric Adams. And if nobody does, they will all be fired. The nastiest strong-arming in DOJ history by a long shot. And Barb McQuaid says, DOJ leadership has put all Public Integrity section lawyers into a room with 1 hour to decide who will dismiss Adams' indictment or else all will be fired. And Sarah Lynch says, a career prosecutor in DOJ's Public Integrity section volunteered to sign the Adams motion in a bid to spare colleagues from being possibly fired. The person is viewed by them as a hero, and the decision came after Emile Bove gave them 1 hour to decide who will file it. Sources tell me that the decision to file the motion was made amid coercion from Bove, and that at one point everyone contemplated resigning. There are about 30 prosecutors left in PIN. Yesterday, several of them resigned over this. So, this is what it reminded me of. The exclusive footage obtained from the room where Emile Bove confronted the Public Integrity section. And a further reminder of who Emile Bove is. He is Trump's former defense attorney. He also worked at the Southern District of New York and was involved in the prosecution of Nicolas Maduro, Cesar Sayoc, Tony Hernandez, and Fabio Lobo. He also went to worked as an associate at Sullivan and Cromwell. My WASP aristocracy appreciators will know the significance of that. And this is what he looks like. This is not a dude that I would want to be on the bad side of. He kind of looks like, I don't know. He looks like he likes to kidnap people. Absolute mob enforcer physiognomy. So this is the guy, I believe, he is the Deputy Attorney General, so I'm assuming this is the guy that Tom Homan sent an email to about if what AOC is doing has reached the level of criminally prosecutable impediment by encouraging people and trying to teach people how to avoid immigration enforcement. Yeah, Tuco for Breaking Bad. That's exactly what he is. Yeah. This one here is pretty funny. This teacher absolutely spazzed out and then was forced to resign.
And the only thing that bothers me more than him is all the Republican senators and congressmen who just keep going along with it. It's not because they believe in it. You gotta know they don't believe in it. They don't believe in any of it. They're just afraid that he's gonna talk smack about them on Truth Social, and then they're gonna lose their job in an election. So they're just doing whatever he says, which is the worst possible thing, because that's called a dictatorship. Jesus Christ, you see that? I'm not kidding. When I say wipe that smile up, I don't care if that's a detention. I just wrote you a referral mentally. You're going to detention for bringing up politics in class. You want to go for 2?
Control yourself, man. Yo.
Excuse me? Excuse me? After all I put up with you for the last 2 years and talked you up and stood your back when they ripped you, you what? You say what? What? Are you serious? Treating me with that disrespect? Are you serious? Are you serious?
This is what soy face sounds like. Are you serious?
Are you serious? If I could take back your letter of recommendation from college right now, I would. You talk to me like that? After everything I've done for you? Are you kidding me? No detention. Don't ever talk to me again personally. You can ask questions in class. You say anything in class without raising your hand, you go to detention for a week. From now on. Disrespect me like that? You got your letter, so now everything's good, right? You got your high grade on the midterm, so everything's good. Now you can treat me like that? After all I've stood up for you, you punk ass. You really gonna do that to me? And the only thing that bothers me more than
my God, first of all, my son would never be actually in a school like that. But if he was, and someone recorded a video of a teacher talking to him like that, this like soy lineal spaz out, oh man, getting to resign would be a privilege. I can't even fathom being in the room and he started screaming at my son. No, only I get to scream at my son. This is a good point from Jeff Garrick. He says, need our guys to start buying up those properties and turn DC red. The effect that could have on the jury pool is huge. Yes. Yes, if you can. If you guys out there, now is the time to start moving in there. We need to start conquering them. Force them out. Move in there, fly an American flag, wear a MAGA hat around, make them feel real uncomfortable. Make them feel crowded out. Bill Hicks says, King Pilled is consistently one of the most white-pilling streams I watch. Well, thank you, sir. I'm glad. That is the goal. And there was a couple other comments here I wanted to highlight. Yeah, Witt said that's a Parks and Rec millennial. Totally. Imagine being a teacher and just completely spazzing out on a kid like that and being like, you don't get to talk to me personally anymore. You can talk to me in my capacity as a teacher, but you don't get to talk to me personally. Never come and speak to me, or you're going to go to detention. Man. $2 from Andrew Starr. Thank you, sir. He says, violence would ensue. Yes, indeed. Might have to spend a night in the clink for something like that. Okay. Let's keep this going here. Speaking of masculinity, this clip is great. The FanDuel American has weighed in. You get it. There's the second half of this clip here is what it's really for. The first half is like a build up to the second half, and this is Clay Travis, who I think is one of the I don't know, archetypal FanDuel Americans. We love our FanDuel Americans here.
Young men have not become much more conservative, at least according to Gallup, but they have become more Republican. So you have this interesting...
Wait, say that again, the men?
They have not identified as more conservative, but they are becoming more Republican. So from the Obama era, you know...
This breaks their brain. They can't comprehend this. The libs cannot comprehend becoming more Republican, but not becoming more conservative. You can hear this in the way that they talk. They especially like all of these Reddit spurgouts and stuff that have been going around lately, you could tell that they think in their minds, they are yelling at like a 2002 run-of-the-mill like BoomerCon. They're yelling at Paul Ryan in their heads. They cannot fathom the notion that you might be able to be more Republican but not more conservative. Wait a second, if you're not conservative, everyone knows the Republicans are the yucky guys. So wait, you're not conservative, but you also like Republicans? That's not possible.
You know, young men and young women were Democrats, right? For both elections, strong majorities of young men and young women voted for Barack Obama. And then you had a slow decline, right? This didn't happen in just one election. There's been a deterioration of Democratic identity among young men for over 10 years. And so
are you saying specifically they turn against Democrats?
I'm saying that they are more, yes, they are more Republican now, but not necessarily because they've shifted to the right on issues like climate change or abortion or same-sex marriage. They're still well to the left of their dads and grandfathers when it comes to that stuff. And so you have this really interesting situation where this group, again, looks on paper fairly liberal in a lot of ways. And in point of fact, you had 6 in 10 young men who are moderates vote for Trump, and more than 1 in 5 liberal young men vote for Trump, right? And so if we're going to look for explanations, we need to move beyond issues. We need to understand, like, there's something about Trump that was attractive, and then there's something about the Democratic Party, at least in its current manifestation, that was repellent.
I was really struck by you saying, especially that, even if they are more likely to identify as Republicans, they're still far more liberal than the men of generations before them. And I think that that's something that would surprise a lot of young women like myself to hear that. I was surprised.
So what is it that we're missing about, or what is it that people who are not, as Magdalene said, people who don't understand why? That's my first question. I have a second one, but go ahead.
Okay, so what I would start with is men.
Someone needs to take this clip here, this part, and set it to some sort of hype music or something. Because, I mean, get ready for liftoff. He just starts cooking.
That's my first question. I have a second one, but go ahead.
Okay, so what I would start with is men aspire to be bigger, stronger, and faster than we are, almost universally. That's why superheroes are popular. That's why pro athletes are popular. Who is the most masculine Democrat right now in America? Mayor Pete.
Is that a gay joke?
No, Mayor Pete. No, well, no, it's just that he's not particularly masculine. Nobody's like, oh, Mayor Pete, he's a badass. Chuck Schumer. Is anybody like, hey, Chuck Schumer holding up an avocado and a beer to talk about the Super Bowl? Is anybody like that trying to grill? Is anybody like, hey, that's a dude I want to hang out with?
But Trump's like a grandpa.
Well, hold on.
Yeah.
Trump took a bullet in his ear and immediately stood up and said, fight, fight, fight. Every man in America and most of the women out here were impressed by that, even if the women won't admit it. She's shaking her head strong. And second part of this, basically summing it up, Democrats for men are pussies and Republicans
Democrats for men
are pussies. There are no masculine men in the Democrat Party right now.
And you know what? It really is that simple. Because this is the thing about the FanDuel American. The FanDuel American is a very, very simple creature. He just wants to grill. He wants to grill. He wants to golf. He wants to watch his sports ball and drink beer. He wants to go work some job and hang out with the boys. This is the 90% of American male population is a FanDuel American. And for them, politics comes down to, hey, that guy's pretty cool. I like that guy. And right now, the Democratic Party has been reduced to a bunch of fags and women who are crying about everything all the time. And nobody wants to be around that. At the end of the day, it really, the aesthetics, the vibes, matter more than the individual policies. And this is what's so significant to me about this iteration of the Trump administration, is that they have the vibes. They have the aesthetics. We've got the hot blonde occupied government. We've got the Giga Chad edits. You've got the president who gets shot and pumps his fist. You've got the vibes. But then you've also got a lot of the policies as well. But the policies are not the thing that's converting most people. The thing that's converted most people, the reason most people voted for Trump, is simply because he seems strong and he seems like a badass. And the alternatives were insufferable, awful people that are just repellent and weak and cry all the time. It's really quite that simple. Now, maintaining them is going to depend upon the trajectory of the vibes over the next 4 years. And, oh, this one here. Leaked audio of Jamie Dimon talking about remote work and his employees. I love this. This is. I understand all the people who are like, they really like remote work. They want to be able to remote work. And I also understand from the perspective of the executive being like, all these people who are out remote working, like remote work should be a privilege. It should not be a default state. If you've demonstrated yourself or you have such a specialized skill that you're really high value, then absolutely remote work should be a thing. But it should not just be like a default thing that is expected. And then the exceptions are the exceptions.
A lot of you were on the fucking Zoom and you were doing the following, okay? You know, looking at your mail, sending texts to each other about what an asshole the other person is, okay? Not paying attention, not reading your stuff, you know, and if you don't think that slows down efficiency, creativity, creates rudeness and stuff, it does, okay? And when I found out that people are doing that, you don't do that in my goddamn meetings. You go to meet with me, you got my attention, you got my focus. I don't bring my goddamn phone. I'm not sending texts to people, okay? It simply doesn't work. And it doesn't work for creativity. It slows down decision-making. And don't give me the shit that work from home Friday works. I call a lot of people on Friday. There's not a goddamn person you get a hold of. But here are the problems, okay? And they are substantial, okay? Which is the young generation is being damaged by this. That means they may or may not be in your particular staff, but they are being left behind. They're being left behind socially, ideas, meeting people. In fact, my guess is most of you live in communities a hell of a lot less diverse than this room. Every area should be looking to be 10% more efficient. If I was running a department of 100 people, I guarantee you if I wanted to, I could run it with 90 and be more efficient. I guarantee you. I could do it in my sleep. And the notion, these bureaucracies, I need more people, I can't get it done. No, because you're filling out requests that don't need to be done. Your people are going to meetings they don't need to go to. Someone told me to approve some of his wealth management that they had to go to 14 committees. I am dying to get the name of the 14 committees. And I feel like firing 14 chairmen of committees. I can't stand it anymore. Now, you have a choice. You don't have to work at JP Morgan. So the people of you who don't want to work at the company, that's fine with me. I'm not mad at you. Don't be mad at me. It's a free country. You can walk with your feet, you know, but this company is going to set our own standards and do it our own way. And I've had it with this kind of stuff. And, you know, I come in, you know, I've been working 7 days a goddamn week since COVID. And I come in and where's everybody else? They're here and there and the Zooms don't show up. And people say they didn't get stuff. So that's not how you run a great company. We didn't build this great company by doing that, by doing the same semi-disease shit that everybody else does.
He's cooking. And a great point here from Furby Slayer. This is exactly what I was going to point out. He's saying two things here. The bigger message is for younger people to get engaged. And he's talking about, like, this is a lot of these CEOs, even the ones who are enormously powerful, like Jamie Dimon, have largely been held hostage by their own HR departments. And it took them a while to realize it. Because someone like Jamie Dimon, like, he's going to hire people to manage these things. And it's normal within the culture. Okay, you got to hire an you have an HR department that has to process all the employment and everything. Well, and then you just hire the most qualified HR people. Well, who determines who the most qualified HR people are? Someone like Jamie Dimon can't micromanage his company. And so it seems here, he's realized that this whole thing has gotten out of control. And from his perspective, he's like, I entrusted you to manage this appropriately. And there are standards and expectations for my managers. And if you have been doing these utterly retarded things, like he says, the semi-diseased shit that everyone else is doing, you've betrayed the company. You've betrayed me. This is Jamie Dimon's legacy. Now, it's a stain on his legacy that he's allowed his company to get that way. But he could fix that. Jamie Dimon's a very interesting character. We've talked about him a lot here on the show, especially Stormy Waters has weighed in on him quite a bit. And Jason Miranchuk has talked about him a lot as well. Go listen to some Jamie Dimon interviews. There was a really good one that he did with what's her name from, I think it was from CBS recently. Was it Leslie Stahl who he talked to? Very interesting. He had a near-death experience not too long ago. He actually had a ruptured aorta and had to go under and had a come to Jesus moment. And those are the sorts of things that when you're a guy in your 50s or 60s and you suddenly confront your mortality, that could have a genuine, it could genuinely affect a guy. So yeah, I think that the big things that stood out to me from that clip was, number one, the importance of getting younger generations engaged, and then also his emphasis on creativity and efficiency. And he sounds like a guy who is absolutely fed up with having his company be handcuffed by HR nannies. All right, now let us talk about how awesome our guys are. Oops. Got to get this window. We won, says Oren McIntyre. This is from Unheard, written by Gavin Haynes. How YouTube forged the online right. Let me grab a drink here real quick. Do me a favor and hit the like button, folks. We're at 87 already. Goodness sakes. You guys are doing well. Oh, come on. Let me read this earlier, but now it's going to paywall it. So we will just remove paywall. As a form, the YouTube video essay is entirely at odds with how we're told we should receive our media in 5-second idiocracy doses. Yet, for perhaps 5 years, this brand of often half-hour-long philosophical treatise was not only everywhere, but was vaguely hip. For something chiefly made by one-man bands and bedroom hacks, it was actually an excellent approximation of the liberal ideal of debate in the public square. It was, in short, a digital gang of Thomas Paines, all trying to bring their ideas to a new generation. Then, just as suddenly, the biggest video hosting platform in the world tweaked a couple of lines in its algorithm, and the video essay era ended. At the 20th anniversary of YouTube, it is important to remember this brief prog spring of a more thoughtful internet, and to recall quite how much influence it had on the internet we've ended up with. By 2018, when I made a radio documentary about the YouTube online right, I'd become fascinated by the form. To me, it seemed like something totally new. A world of genuine outsiders, people who would otherwise have had no standing in conventional journalism. They performed the kind of dense argumentation that workaday journalists neither had the bandwidth for, nor, often, the brain cells for. Central to this emergent world was the figure of Carl Benjamin, a YouTuber who went by the nom de guerre of Sargon of Akkad, a name he'd pulled from an ancient Mesopotamian king. Benjamin had no bona fides. A university dropout, he'd briefly had a job sweating data at the Swindon Research Council. Somewhere along the way, he'd become radicalized against what were then called social justice warriors. That's a term I haven't heard in a long time. It would be another 4 years before anyone called them woke. Railing against the perversion of his beloved video games by diversity ideology, Benjamin uploaded essays that used the core of Western philosophy to justify his positions and vanquish his enemies. Chief among them was Anita Sarkeesian, a feminist who typified the mold then emerging. Recently graduated upper-middle-class girls obsessed with tokenistic representation, intersectionality, and victimology. Benjamin saw the tide of evil rolling in. Like a sucker, Benjamin actually went back to the core texts of Western thought, arguing from first principles. For fans of their idol's lugubrious baritone, there was a kind of shock in being asked to defend things that, until yesterday, had barely needed considering. Merit is good. Free speech is inalienable. Incomers to a society should contribute. But the arguments were dredged up from Aristotle's ideas on the good to Voltaire on the separation of powers. A particular totem of the day was to believe in on liberty, as though Mill were the final word on everything. Even Milo Yiannopoulos, that charlatan, would bang on about having a copy by his bedside. Later, Benjamin turned to analyzing power itself. He published video essays on Machiavelli. He became obsessed with reverse engineering the work of Saul Alinsky, the Marxist theorist who wrote Rules for Radicals, the leftist agitator's Bible. Others joined the party with their own beats and their own pseudonyms. The godless spell checker spun out of the post-Dawkins militant atheist wave. The academic agent, for his part, was a moonlighting university lecturer, initially a lover of Ludwig von Mises and Austrian economics, but who gradually turned away from libertarianism and towards hardcore neo-reaction. At the time, with Obama in the White House and Osborneism ascendant, the right was in disgustingly flabby shape. In the mainstream press, certainly, the Sebastian Payne tendency was all you got. The right, as the left, driving at the speed limit. But on YouTube, at least, a fight back had begun in earnest. Quote, "We can't wait on anyone to do this for us," Benjamin told a 2017 live stream. There was no world beyond. Nor was the right alone. The left were busy developing its own essayists, too. Collectively known as BreadTube, they pioneered a tactic called algorithmic hijacking. Piggybacking on keywords popular with their right-wing opponents, they ensured their response videos ranked high in searches. Yes, I'm sure this was just them piggybacking on keywords that hijacked the algorithm. Top of the heap was genuinely entertaining Natalie Wynn. Known to fans as ContraPoints, Wynn mixed film criticism with leftist ideology in a similar style to the cult theorist Mark Fisher. Across the Atlantic, there were the likes of H. Bomber Guy, the pseudonym of Harry Brewise, who amassed 1.7 million subscribers with videos like Climate Denial, a Measured Response. When it came, the end was sudden. It happened around 2019 when YouTube switched up its algorithm. To boost overall watch time, admins chose to prioritize videos that were far longer, looser confections. Suddenly, the 2-hour live stream was at the top of everyone's feed, fatal for 20-minute video essays that could take days to script and edit. And with that, creators who had been stars of the previous era began to melt away. Their view counts ticked down, the gaps between videos grew longer, most either stopped or adopted the new mode. In many ways, though, this shift was helpful to the burgeoning online right. Less reliant on the auteur, they could instead lean on celebrity guests culled from other YouTube channels. No longer operating in their own silos, they effectively became a cast, a menagerie of personalities who visited each other's home bases for cozy chats. Benjamin leaned into the trend effectively. Exhausted by his own content production cycle, he decided to clone himself. Farming out his shtick to a new generation of 20-somethings in blazers, he launched an expanded daily show that he called the Podcast of the Lotus Eaters. It chiefly consisted of Benjamin and his mini-me's reacting to stories they read out from the mainstream press. The end, you can hear the gritted teeth as he writes this. He's seething. The end of the video essay also meant the start of an era in which the algorithm prioritized the live stream and the long, rambling podcast-style chat. In a certain sense, that was a good next step for Benjamin and the other past masters of the form. Constantly going on each other's shows meant that norms began to establish themselves as these thought leaders moved from one stream to the next. Suddenly, everyone was talking about Carl Schmitt. Suddenly, it was taken as ancient wisdom that he who decides the exception is sovereign. In the scheme of things, the video essay era was a brief ellipsis. Yet it was deeply consequential, and not just in terms of Carl Benjamin's career. For a start, there was the generational cohort effect. The 24-year-olds of today would have been 15 back then. They grew up in the world of the YouTube essay. For them, indeed, it wasn't just fashion, it was formative. And when you hear the head-banging tone of the Zoomer crew now coming through, what you are witnessing are people who have imbibed Benjamin's whole moral style. They come preloaded with the facts and arguments of the video essay era. Does migration drive growth? No. Does multiculturalism need more time to succeed? No. For them, these are settled questions. Not that we ever quite got a breakout YouTube superstar. No technology has supplanted its elements. Far from becoming integrated into TV land, a curious cordon sanitaire endures between broadcast media and YouTube. Yet the fruits are everywhere. Just look at Trumpism in its second term. At the core of what has been happening with USAID and executive orders is precisely the kind of first principles analysis of power that the first term lacked. It has allowed the new government to get in at the roots of American bureaucracy, cutting off the enemy's supply lines. Today, it's the idea on everyone's lips, not because it is exhausted, but because the whip hand is about to pass over. Power is finally with this new revankist right. Much like Mao's Long March, the fight at first seemed unwinnable, until gradually the insurgents gained strength, their ideas coalescing into a creed, an ideology with world-shaping power. Certainly Benjamin himself seems to view his political journey in just these terms. With the USAID revelations of subsidy for leftist causes, Benjamin pulled up an alleged payment credit to a feminist game development company called Feminist Frequency. Who was the CEO of this firm? None other than Anita Sarkeesian, the target of the YouTuber all those years ago. Beneath the receipts, Benjamin simply tweets, "I just wanted to play video games." Back then, terminally online nerds really did still have a live and let live mentality, until politics came looking for them. At first, they thought classical liberalism would solve their problems, but the train didn't stop there. The movement trundled on, until like the academic agent, it became genuinely reactionary. not merely anti-SJW, it rather assails the entire post-war consensus, from immigration to welfare to state education. The more they dug into what was wrong with their Mill and their Aristotle, the more the YouTubers hunted for radical solutions. Today, the online theorists are digging up the very flagstones of liberalism. They scoff at the ideal of the public square and the marketplace of ideas. They're into the deep plumbing of power, rewarding friends and punishing enemies. We're a long way from the golden age of Milton Friedman destroys clips. Today, their heroes aren't Mill and Voltaire. They're Thomas Carlyle, Oswald Spengler, and James Burnham. They really should have let him play video games. Gavin Haynes is a journalist and former editor-at-large at Vice. There's honestly, you can tell the predisposition of the author. He kind of tried to cover it. He tried to be as balanced as he could, and honestly, he was pretty balanced. But you could still tell that he's not happy about this. The gamer awakened. All right, let me catch up on your comments here real quick. Melvin says, it's me. I just wanted to play video games. Why did you make me do this? Yeah, I was, Mr. Oblivion says, Natalie Wynn is a dude. I'd never have watched, I don't know if I have ever watched a single YouTube video of any bread tuber. I've seen clips. I've seen clips on Twitter. I've heard people like the Distributors talk about them or critique them, but I've never actually sat and watched any of them, and I've tried to make a point of keeping it that way. Okay. Now. Oh, $5 super chat here from Seasider. Thank you, friend. Salute to the Sargon pipeline. Yeah, I've always enjoyed Sargon. Okay, so this here, let's talk a little foreign policy. This is a report from Jack Posobiec. This is from yesterday. This is what potentially led to Zelensky to not sign the mineral deal. Now, Jack Posobiec explains what the meeting with Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, and Zelensky meant, and note the timeline that he lays out here. After this, there's a couple of other points that I'm going to touch on, and then we're going to listen to this speech from J.D. Vance.
Human Events Daily is on the ground yet again in Ukraine, showing you the inside story of what's happening inside these negotiations. Secretary Bessent met with Zelensky only hours after Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, delivered a blistering statement in Brussels at the NATO conference. Hegseth saying that the pre-2014 borders for Ukraine were not going to happen, that NATO membership for Ukraine was not going to happen, that the United States would not send troops to the territory of Ukraine in any security post-war situation or agreement. These are things that led Zelensky at the meeting potentially to not sign the deal. So Secretary Bessent arrived with a copy of the mineral deal with him. He handed it to President Zelensky. Zelensky looked at it, said that he wanted a security guarantee. The security guarantee would be a de facto NATO membership. This was not part of the deal. He also said again and again that he wanted to meet with President Trump. Secretary Bessent urged him to sign the deal. President Zelensky did not.
One thing that I think he mentions here, real quick though, is that so Bessent is what? Like he's like the CFO of the government, effectively. And Zelensky just said like a week ago that of the 170 something million or $1 billion that have been sent to Ukraine, like 100 billion of it is missing. That's why you're going to send your CFO over there to be like, hey, where's our money? We want our money back. And then the mineral deal was one of the things they were presenting to him, that basically you're gonna give us access to all of your minerals in payment for all of that money that we sent over there.
But said that he would revisit it potentially when he meets with J.D. Vance in Munich on Friday. This is a very critical point, ladies and gentlemen, because then, just as we were walking out of the presidential complex, the presidential palace there in Kiev. That's when President Trump, almost to the very minute, posted his Truth Social saying that while we had been inside and the secretary was there meeting with Zelensky and holding a press conference, that President Trump had spent the entire same hour on the phone with Vladimir Putin. So he gave Zelensky the opportunity to sign the deal first. Zelensky didn't sign the deal right away. That's when President Trump posted the Truth Social that has now been heard around the world, one that has the European leaders absolutely apoplectic that President Trump is cutting them out and saying that the neoconservatives and the European leaders, the NATO countries are going to be cut out because he said, look, if you aren't funding this war and if you aren't paying your NATO dues, then why should I include you directly in the negotiations? I'm going to go straight to the heart of the matter. And he spoke with President Putin directly for over an hour at the same time that Secretary Bessent and the delegation were there in Kiev. Then Zelensky immediately hopped on the phone and said, let me call Trump, let me call Trump, let me call the president. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot going on in this world. There's a lot of moving pieces here. J.D. Vance, Secretary Hegseth, Secretary Bessent will now be joined in Munich with the newly minted DNI Tulsi Gabbard, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe. It remains to see what happens with the Vance-Zelensky summit tomorrow in Munich.
How frickin' delicious is that? So Bessent goes in and meets with Zelensky, presents him this deal. Zelensky's like, thanks, but no thanks. I'd like to talk to the president. Please let me talk to the president. Then they get out of that meeting, and Zelensky finds out when Trump makes this Truth Social post that the whole time he was meeting with Scott Bessent and turning down that deal, Trump was on the phone with Putin and had then posted, Putin and I are negotiating this, and I'm going to let Zelensky know. He's been completely sidelined. They totally ran a game on him. And he realizes it too late. He's like, you just fucked up, little man. Should have taken the deal while it was available to you. This response from Medvedev was hilarious. After Trump posted that about Putin, him talking with Putin, him actually treating him like a serious person, treating the Russians like they are a serious people with legitimate values and concerns that deserve respect. Medvedev tweets, frigid spinster Europe is mad with jealousy and rage. It wasn't warned of the Putin-Trump call or consulted about its content or later statements. It shows its real role in the world and chances of snagging a husband. No wonder. Europe's time is over. It's weak, ugly, and useless. Luongo says Dmitry does have a way with words. All of the black pillars who were like, oh, Trump's not going to get out of the Ukraine. Trump's he's got to bend over for the neocons. The regime wants Trump. The regime wants Trump. Yeah, how's that working out? This every single thing the administration has done with respect to Europe thus far has been smiling at them while absolutely bludgeoning them. The administration's making it very clear to Europe that you are not going to be treated as peer nations. The EU is illegitimate. NATO exists to the extent that we want it to, and when we decide we're done with it, it's going to be done. So we're going to dictate all the terms. The European states' proper role is one of deference and subservience to the United States. And as long as they realize that and they maintain that posture, then we will have very amicable relations. We would love to have great amicable relations as long as you recognize your place in the world. There are 3 superpowers, and none of them exist in Europe. So Europe needs to pick a daddy. They don't get to dictate their own future. It's just a geographical fact. The only thing they do get to dictate is who they choose as a protector. And they're going to have to pay for that protection rather than just grifting off of the wealth of the United States. Offering these massive social programs because the United States just subsidizes all of their defense. Remember that $2.7 trillion in Medicare and Medicaid payments that have gone to ineligible people overseas? How much do you think that is localized in Europe, within European nations? I'm sure it's gone all over the place, but I'm sure the preponderance of it is in Europe. They have been skimming wealth from the United States for decades. If it wasn't for the sacrifice of American people, they never would have rebuilt themselves after the war that they dragged us into, the second war they dragged us into. Now they're trying to drag us into a third one. They need to recognize their place. So, J.D. Vance shows up in Munich, and supposedly he was supposed to meet with Olaf Scholz, the current chancellor of Germany, and he snubbed him. He did not meet with him. And a former U.S. official said of Vance's thinking in snubbing him, "We don't need to see him. He won't be chancellor long." And after that, 48 stepped right up and completely, this is like Negan with the bat, but smiling and diplomatic the entire way through. We're going to watch this whole thing, 19 minutes of it. It's entirely worth it.
Well, thank you, and thanks to all the gathered delegates and luminaries and media professionals, and thanks especially to the hosts of the Munich Security Conference for being able to put on such an incredible event. We're, of course, thrilled to be here. We're happy to be here. And, you know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is, of course, our shared values. And, you know, it's great to be back in Germany. As you heard earlier, I was here last year as United States Senator. I saw Foreign Secretary David Lammy and joked that both of us last year had different jobs than we have now. But now it's time for all of our countries, for all of us who have been fortunate enough to be given political power by our respective peoples, to use it wisely to improve their lives. And I want to say that, you know, I was fortunate in my time here to spend some time outside the walls of this conference over the last 24 hours. And I've been so impressed by the hospitality of the people, even as, of course, as they're reeling from yesterday's horrendous attack. And the first time I was ever in Munich was with my wife, actually, who's here with me today, on a personal trip. And I've always loved the city of Munich, and I've always loved its people. And I just want to say that we're very moved, and our thoughts and prayers are with Munich and everybody affected by the evil inflicted on this beautiful community. We're thinking about you, we're praying for you, and we will certainly be rooting for you in the days and weeks to come. Now, I hope that's not the last bit of applause that I get, but we gather.
That's basically the last bit of applause that he's going to get. But it's funny that he says this because he knows what's coming.
At this conference, of course, to discuss security. And normally, we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within.
The biggest concern is not Russia or China or any other external actor. It's the threat from within. So they're reeling now already. First, he says, we look forward to our European partners stepping up and pulling their weight in providing for their own national defense. And the external threats, the big bad boogeyman Putin, China, those aren't the real problems. The real problems here are the threats from within. And note that when he said he loves Munich, he says he's very impressed with the hospitality of all the people. And he's always loved the city. He loves the people who live in the city. There's someone missing there. Who does he not love? Who does he not have respect for?
The retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election. He warned that if things don't go to plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany too. Now, these cavalier statements are shocking to American ears. For years, we've been told that everything we fund and support is in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy.
An interesting thing I just thought of here. It's going to get so much better. They're getting a spanking right here. Where's Tucker? Daddy's home, and he's pissed off. You've been very, very bad. You're going to get a spanking. But the subtext of what he's saying here is, we have been subsidizing your countries for a long time. And all of this, the premise of all of this is our shared democratic values. And yet you guys are not upholding those shared democratic values. And this is where rhetorically talking about democracy is so frickin' useful. Rhetorically speaking, it's effectively like steel manning them. You want to talk about democracy? Okay, well, what's your record on democracy? Because democracy is this great and wonderful thing, right? This is our shared values. Our shared democratic values. But it looks like you don't actually uphold those values. So then all of this money and support and subsidization that we've been giving you is on a fraudulent basis. You've been defrauding us. We have these shared democratic values. And because of that, you guys are entitled to all of this support that we've funneled to you for decades. You've nursed at our teat for so long. And yet you're not actually upholding yourself to those democratic values. So then we have no more basis for participating in this charade because you've been defrauding us.
But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard. And I say ourselves because I fundamentally believe that we are on the same team. We must do more than talk about democratic values. We must live them.
He just called them hypocrites. Ryan Isaac says, imagine the backroom conversations that are happening if this is the public conversation. Correct. And the problem with some of the crayon eaters out there is that they'll spurg out on some of these things about like our democratic values and elections, and they'll I don't know, freak out Ancapistanally. But again, this is a steel man. It's holding their feet to the fire. And also, this is a diplomatic speech. He's there as a diplomat. And so there are expectations of decorum, and there's proper ways that you speak in these terms. So he's not going to come there, even if the administration's implicit posture toward them is one of relative hostility. You guys are going to be allies if you act like it, and if not, you're not going to get any special treatment. There's still an expectation that you're going to speak diplomatically. And so every single thing he says carries a particular weight to it. It's intended to be read into. You're not supposed to take the words at face value. You're supposed to interpret them through diplomacy speak. And based on the response to this speech, they 100% understood exactly what he was saying because they freaked the fuck out.
Now, within living memory of many of you in this room, the Cold War positioned defenders of democracy against much more tyrannical forces on this continent. And consider the side in that fight that censored dissidents, that closed churches, that canceled elections. Were they the good guys? Certainly not. And thank God they lost the Cold War. They lost because they neither valued nor respected all of the extraordinary blessings of liberty. The freedom to surprise, to make mistakes, to invent, to build. As it turns out, you can't mandate innovation or creativity, just as you can't force people what to think, what to feel, or what to believe. And we believe those things are certainly connected.
He's quite literally calling them communists. He just drew a direct comparison to the Soviet Union. And then he's saying, you can't mandate innovation. You can't mandate creativity. You can't mandate what people are supposed to think or believe. He's calling them communists to their face.
And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief. And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person, but no. This last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
Yes, who had said this here? Bill Hicks says, actual victim blaming. Did I hear that right? Yes, yes. Now, isn't it significant that the examples that he's choosing to highlight as egregious involve prayer and abortion? The values and posture of the administration are being expressed here. We are a Christian nation. Abortion is evil. And if you are a government that is going to crack down on people praying, and you're going to promote abortion, you're going to censor speech, you are not an ally with us. We do not have shared values. And so we're not going to have economic or trade or defense or financial relationships with one another as if we do have shared values. If you want that, if you want the gravy train to keep flowing, you need to get your shit together. When Elon Musk has been tweeting, "Make Europe great again," this is what he's talking about. Make Europe great again is a propaganda campaign orchestrated at overthrowing the ruling powers in Europe by encouraging populist right wing, which is becoming more and more meaningless of a term. It won't last much longer, but populist, nativist political movements to overthrow the established banking family-sponsored politicos. That's the subtext to all of this. And they're taking it exactly that way. And before I finish, let me give a huge shout-out to Nadernaut. $50 super chat. Thank you, my friend. Big bucks coming in here. He says, keep up the great work. Well, because you sent me a $50 super chat, I am absolutely going to keep up the great work. A couple other comments that I saw here. Nephilim says, Adam Smith Connor. I'm sure that wasn't on purpose. Yes. Yeah, Crapers. Here's why him saying this is bad. Yeah, right. Oh, I see it incoming. The little man has not appeared yet, but supposedly he's incoming. Oh, I hear it. All right, we'll be back to JD here in just a second. There he is. Look at you. Good grief, what do you have? What is that? Oh, your little silly guy. It lights up. It lights up. You getting ready for bed?
Why is
you got to show it. You got to show it over. Yeah, there you go. You got to bop it so it lights up. Whack it again so that it lights up. There it is. That's pretty cool. You got to lean your face in here if you want people to see it. There you go. See, now you're on the screen. Say hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Look, Ryan put oinks in the chat.
Where are the oinks in
Do you see them right here on the screen? Right over there. All the oinks. No, you can't touch the screen from here because it's not a touch screen. All right.
Can I put that on one of them?
Put what?
The little yellow arrow on one.
Yeah, here. There you go. You see it moving around? He's learning how to use a mouse. All right. Easy. Hold on. You can't push on it hard. Okay, that's enough. I'm afraid you're going to close something. All right. Good night, big guy. I love you.
Good night, Daddy. I love you.
I love you, mister. All right, go with mommy. All right. I choose you, Papa. I love you. All right, thank you for indulging the Beastwood appearance. Chat ends. KP channel deleted. I'm using an Apple touchpad. I can't remember exactly what it's called. They've got their special name for it, but just a touchpad here, and it requires a light touch, and he was not using a light touch, so things were starting to get squirrely. All right, let's get back to old 48 here.
And in the interest of comedy, my friends, but also in the interest of truth, I will admit that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship have come not from within Europe, but from within my own country, where the prior administration threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation. Misinformation like, for example, the idea that coronavirus had likely leaked from a laboratory in China. Our own government encouraged private companies to silence people who dared to utter what turned out to be an obvious truth. So I come here today not just with an observation, but with an offer. And just as the Biden administration seemed desperate to silence people for speaking their minds, so the Trump administration will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree.
Oh, there's some applause.
Now, we're at the point, of course, that the situation has gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election based on the flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. Now, as I understand it, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections. But I'd ask my European friends to have some perspective. You can believe it's wrong for Russia to buy social media advertisements to influence your elections. We certainly do. You can condemn it on the world stage even. But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with.
If your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising, it wasn't very strong to begin with. That was probably the Belarusian delegation there.
Good news is that I happen to think your democracies are substantially less brittle than many people apparently fear. And I really do believe that allowing our citizens to speak their mind will make them stronger still. Which, of course, brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations. Now, again, we don't have to agree with everything or anything that people say. But when people represent, when political leaders represent an important constituency, it is incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them. Now, to many of us on the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old entrenched interests hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation, who simply don't like the idea that somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion or, God forbid, vote a different way or, even worse, win an election. Now, this is a security conference, and I'm sure you all came here prepared to talk about how exactly you intend to increase defense spending over the next few years in line with some new target. And that's great, because as President Trump has made abundantly clear, he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent. We don't think, you hear this term, burden sharing, but we think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger. But let me also ask you, how will you even begin to think through the kinds of budgeting questions if we don't know what it is that we're defending in the first place? I've heard a lot already in my conversations, and I've had many, many great conversations with many people gathered here in this room. I've heard a lot about what you need to defend yourselves from, and of course that's important. But what has seemed a little bit less clear to me, and certainly I think to many of the citizens of Europe, is what exactly it is that you're defending yourselves for. What is the positive vision that animates this shared security compact that we all believe is so important?
What is the positive vision that animates this security compact that we all believe is so important? Whoever's writing his speeches for him knows how to write speeches. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's demonstrated many times that he's a very good writer. He may even be writing all of his own speeches. I wouldn't be surprised. We got another $50 super chat. Blue Skittle. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you guys. Ryan Isaac said it looks like USAID is back up and running in the King Pill chat. Thank you guys very, very much.
And I believe deeply that there is no security if you are afraid of the voices, the opinions, and the conscience that guide your very own people. Europe faces many challenges, but the crisis this continent faces right now, the crisis I believe we all face together, is one of our own making. If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you. Nor, for that matter, is there anything that you can do for the American people who elected me and elected President Trump. You need democratic mandates to accomplish anything of value in the coming years. Have we learned nothing that thin mandates produce unstable results?
Hold on. I need to listen to this section again.
If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you.
If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you. And you can hear a pin drop in there.
Nor, for that matter, is there anything that you can do for the American people who elected me and elected President Trump. You need democratic mandates to accomplish anything of value in the coming years. Have we learned nothing that thin mandates produce unstable results? But there is so much of value that can be accomplished with the kind of democratic mandate that I think will come from being more responsive to the voices of your citizens. If you're going to enjoy competitive economies, if you're going to enjoy affordable energy and secure supply chains, then you need mandates to govern, because you have to make difficult choices to enjoy all of these things. And of course, we know that very well in America. You cannot win a democratic mandate by censoring your opponents or putting them in jail, whether that's the leader of the opposition, a humble Christian praying in her own home, or a journalist trying to report the news. Nor can you win one by disregarding your basic electorate on questions like who gets to be a part of our shared society. And of all the pressing challenges that the nations represented here face, I believe there is nothing more urgent than mass migration. Today,
nothing more urgent than mass migration. So he's got them all riled up now. He's called them communists. He's portrayed them as the people who are oppressing old women who are praying and journalists trying to report the news. So you should, like, who's more vulnerable than an old woman? And then the journalist is like, oh, the sweet journalist, we need to protect the journalist. And he's been absolutely cooking them. They're squirming around. You can hear a pin drop in there. And now he's going to bring up the Great Replacement.
almost 1 in 5 people living in this country moved here from abroad. That is, of course, an all-time high. It's a similar number, by the way, in the United States, also an all-time high. The number of immigrants who entered the EU from non-EU countries doubled between 2021 and 2022 alone, and of course it's gotten much higher since. And we know the situation, it didn't materialize in a vacuum. It's the result of a series of conscious decisions made by politicians all over the continent and others across the world over the span of a decade.
Now, I don't know what's up with the camera angle here, like why we're getting like zoomed way in on him. But let me play that again one more time.
Situation, it didn't materialize in a vacuum.
So the greatest threat right now is mass migration. He gives the statistics for it. And this greatest threat didn't emerge in a vacuum. Where did it come from?
It's the result of a series of conscious decisions made by politicians all over the continent and others across the world over the span of a decade.
Conscious decisions made by politicians. The greatest threat that exists today, right now, is not evil Putler. It's not even Xi. It's not the Chi-Coms. The greatest threat in the world right now is mass migration that was intentionally seeded by conscious decisions made by politicians all across the continent. He's telling them to their face that the European ruling classes are the greatest threat to civilization on the planet right now.
We saw the horrors.
And that it was done intentionally. Not only, it's not like they just bumbled their way into this. They have intentionally become the greatest threat. Another super chat from Nephilim, $20. He says, for Eastwood. My friend, thank you. All right, you guys, I gotta throw one up to you. You're piling in the super chats. My heart goes out to you.
The world over the span of a decade. We saw the horrors wrought by these decisions yesterday in this very city. And of course, I can't bring it up again without thinking about the terrible victims who had a beautiful winter day in Munich ruined. Our thoughts and prayers are with them and will remain with them. But why did this happen in the first place? It's a terrible story, but it's one we've heard way too many times in Europe and unfortunately too many times in the United States as well. An asylum seeker, often a young man in his mid-20s, already known to police, rams a car into a crowd and shatters a community. How many times must we suffer these appalling setbacks before we change course and take our shared civilization in a new direction?
He sounds genuinely pissed. So you guys have intentionally created this situation, and it keeps happening. Your people keep getting killed by this threat that you have intentionally, consciously imported. How many times is this going to happen before you get your shit together?
No voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants. But you know what they did vote for? In England, they voted for Brexit, and agree or disagree, they voted for it. And more all over Europe, they're voting for political leaders who promise to put an end to out-of-control migration. Now, I happen to agree with a lot of these concerns, but you don't have to agree with me. I just think that people care about their homes, they care about their dreams, they care about their safety and their capacity to provide for themselves and their children. And they're smart. I think this is one of the most important things I've learned in my brief time in politics. Contrary to what you might hear a couple mountains over in Davos, the citizens of all of our nations don't generally think of themselves as educated animals.
Contrary to what you might hear a couple mountains over in Davos. These uppity Euros are just chewing their own teeth out. Another $20 super chat from Andrew Starr. Why not? Cheers. Cheers to you, sir. Thank you.
Contrary to what you might hear a couple mountains over in Davos, the citizens of all of our nations don't generally think of themselves as educated animals or as interchangeable cogs of a global economy.
Our citizens don't see themselves as interchangeable cogs of a global economy. This is a line straight from our corner of the internet. Nobody in the world was talking like this except for us like 5 or 10 years ago.
And it's hardly surprising that they don't want to be shuffled about or relentlessly ignored by their leaders. And it is the business of democracy to adjudicate these big questions at the ballot box. I believe that dismissing people, dismissing their concerns, Or worse yet, shutting down media, shutting down elections, or shutting people out of the political process protects nothing. In fact, it is the most surefire way to destroy democracy. And speaking up and expressing opinions isn't election interference. Even when people express views outside your own country, and even when those people are very influential. And trust me, I say this with all humor, if American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk. But what
Oh, the awkward, nervous, low tittering. Oh, man. More super chats. Rob P. with $20. He says, I'll go ahead and join in. And $5 from Screwed Up Texas. My heart goes out to you. Thank you, guys. And 10 more leaf bucks from Slosher. You guys are generous tonight. I'm going to chalk this all up to 48 out here making us proud. I wish someone in the crowd yelled, "Ayo!" He knew that one wasn't going to get a laugh.
You guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk. But what German democracy, what no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid or unworthy of even being considered. Democracy rests on the sacred principle that the voice of the people matters. There's no room for firewalls. You either uphold the principle or you don't.
The firewall is an explicit reference to the cordon sanitaire that I read you guys the thread about recently about the essentially formal policy within within the German government to just act as if AfD doesn't even exist. So I mean, the subtext of all of this is we're going to sanction you if you keep censoring your people. If you don't let parties like AfD or Reform or whatever other country, if you don't let these so-called right-wing populist parties win, we are going to sanction you and crush your economies.
Europeans, the people, have a voice. European leaders have a choice. And my strong belief is that we do not need to be afraid of the future. You can embrace what your people tell you, even when it's surprising, even when you don't agree. And if you do so, you can face the future with certainty and with confidence, knowing that the nation stands behind each of you. And that, to me, is the great magic of democracy. It's not in these stone buildings or beautiful hotels. It's not even in the great institutions that we have built together as a shared society. To believe in democracy is to understand that each of our citizens has wisdom and has a voice. And if we refuse to listen to that voice, even our most successful fights will secure very little. As Pope John Paul II, in my view, one of the most extraordinary champions of democracy on this continent or any other, once said, "Do not be afraid." We shouldn't be afraid of our people, even when they express views that disagree with their leadership. Thank you all. Good luck to all of you. God bless you.
The future is in good hands, man. Ian Carroll says, dude has to have an alter incognito YouTube account. He goes bar for bar with our guys. I will say, I mentioned the other day that there was, so when JD, when 48 here, replied to that small account, and people noticed that the account that's long been rumored to be his burner was following that account, even though the JD Vance or the vice president account was not following it. I went and followed that Anon account. Just see what happens. And a couple other friends had followed it, and he followed him back right away, whoever it is. And if it's actually him, then the dude has some legendary posts that would blow your mind. If it's actually him. I have no idea if it is. There's people who I trust who've made a pretty strong case that it's him. There's circumstantial evidence. Who knows? If it is him, I think it's probably better that it doesn't get out. Just let it. It was locked down and said it made a cryptic message about having to leave, having to go away for a while. And then it's been locked down ever since. So I followed it, but didn't get it followed back right away and kind of forgot about it. And then he followed me back today, seconds before Vice President JD Vance, the vice president account, tweeted something. Within seconds, probably 15 seconds maybe, he followed me back, and then the JD Vance account retweeted someone. I don't know. It was very interesting timing. Maybe there, maybe not. We'll see. If you want to know who it is, then DM me on Twitter, and I'll send it to you there. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to air them out publicly. This is here. Still Boneless says Vance in Munich is exactly what we voted for.
I've heard a lot about what you need to defend yourselves from, and of course that's important. But what has seemed a little bit less clear to me, and certainly I think to many of the citizens of Europe, is what exactly it is that you're defending yourselves for. What is the positive vision that animates this shared security compact that we all believe is so important? And I believe deeply that there is no security if you are afraid of the voices, the opinions, and the conscience that guide your very own people.
Patriots in control. Now, look at this. This is German Defense Minister Pistorius reacting to Vance's speech. Now, part of this video here is him speaking in German with a translation, and then he starts speaking English. And I don't have a real clear. You probably have to listen to the whole thing to get a better idea. But I thought it was interesting that he's speaking in German and then switches to English, and I couldn't entirely figure out what the purpose of it was based on this context.
This is why I cannot just ignore what we heard before. I cannot not comment on the speech we heard by the US Vice President. We fight for your right to be against us. That is the motto, one of the mottos of the Bundeswehr, and it stands for our democracy. This democracy that was just called into question by the US Vice President, and not just the German democracy, but Europe as a whole. He spoke of the annulment of democracy, and if I understood him correctly, he compares the condition of Europe with the condition that prevails in some authoritarian regimes. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not acceptable. This is not acceptable. This is not the Europe, not the democracy where I live and where I conduct my election campaign right now. And this is not the democracy that I witness every day in our parliament. In our democracy, every opinion has a voice. And it makes it possible for parties that are partly extremist, such as the AfD, and they can campaign just as any other party. This is democracy. And if the Vice President had the opportunity to switch on his TV set when he arrived yesterday, he would have seen one of those candidates in primetime TV. By the way, we even admit media that spread Russian propaganda, and the representatives of the federal government answer their questions. Nobody is excluded. But democracy does not mean that a vociferous minority will automatically be right, and they cannot decide what truth is. It does not mean that anyone can say anything, and democracy must be able to defend itself against extremists that try to destroy it.
A vociferous minority will not automatically be right. This is like a they cry out as they strike you moment in the flesh.
I am happy to live in Europe where this democracy is defended every day against its internal and external enemies. And therefore, I would like to explicitly contradict and oppose the impression that Vice President Vance suggested here, that our democracies oppress and silence minorities. We not only know against whom we defend our countries, but also what we defend it for. It's for democracy, for freedom of opinion, for the rule of law, and the dignity of each and every one, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, but unlike the Vice President, I would also like to focus my speech on the most pressing questions of European and transatlantic security. The last days have confirmed what many had speculated for months. The United States are pushing for a quick peace settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and they expect Europe to take the lead in securing any agreement that follows.
So yeah, I don't necessarily pick out a really clear reason why he switched from German to English, because like the German is going to be dubbed over, and there's plenty of non-Germans who could speak German, and so it was kind of an interesting thing. But that's in diplomatic terms. JD Vance came out and dropped his dick on the table in front of them, and This is similarly a pretty significant diplomatic response, like directly saying, no, we reject everything he said and he's wrong. It's a strong stance to take. I don't think it's going to work out for him. And right after this, remember, I showed you the thing with how Vance did not meet with Olaf Scholz. He did meet with Alice Weidel, the head of AFD. So there's a very clear message being sent here. At the same time that all of this is happening, now remember, so Vance goes to Europe and has his big speech about AI, where he's exhorting them to follow the United States lead on AI, and also said anybody who stands in the way of our values and tries to, we're going to take, if you restrict our ability to acquire any sort of resources that we consider to be integral to AI, which would cover a wide range of energy, manufacturing, supply chains, we're going to treat you as a hostile. And then he has this speech where he just absolutely bends them over a table for 20 minutes and says, the greatest threat in the world right now is you guys. Meanwhile, Trump is calling Putin personally, negotiating, blocking Zelensky out of it altogether. He's just like letting him know after the fact, hey, FYI, this is what we're doing with your country. And then Trump comes out and makes this declaration. Europe is just losing across the board right now.
At some point, when things settle down, I'm going to meet with China, and I'm going to meet with Russia in particular, those two, and I'm going to say there's no reason for us to be spending almost $1 trillion on military. There's no reason for you to be spending $400 billion. China's going to be at 400 billion. We're at $1 trillion. We're going to be at close to $1 trillion. And I'm going to say, we can settle this on, we can spend this on other things. We don't have to spend this on military because, and I'm going to be meeting with China. You know, we were trying to de-escalate nuclear, and I was in a position where Russia had agreed and China had agreed we were going to start, and then we had a rigged election, so that never took place. But this one was too big to rig. We won by so much that it was too big to rig.
So War Clandestine here says, not only is Trump canceling World War III and normalizing relations with Russia, he's also looking to come to a deal with Russia and China to collectively reduce our military spending and even potential denuclearization. Less money on military, more money for the people. Trump is turning off the war machine, creating diplomatic and peaceful relationships with our perceived enemies, and reversing our trajectory leading to global nuclear war. If Trump can pull this off, we don't even have to add him to Rushmore. We can build him his own damn mountain. VAI says, if we're going to keep USAID, we should be using it for regime change in Europe. And you know, right about the time that you posted that comment, this exact same thought went through my head. I am just fine if they keep USAID around if it means that they're going to be subverting the ruling powers in Europe right now and replacing them with alternative controlled opposition, or not, it wouldn't be controlled opposition necessarily, but with loyal, subservient clients. I know none of the Europeans out there are going to like that, and I don't expect you to, but I think if you're real honest with yourself, you know you would be better off that way. So there's interesting levels to this. I think one thing is, it's pretty clear. Everyone knows that the United States. Did I have a clip on this? Let me just double check real quick. Yeah, here, I'll do this one now. Rokahana tweeted, China built 1,794 ships in 2022. The U.S. built 5. That's not a typo. How is this not the focus of our politics to rebuild America's industrial base? And Luke Groman said, because until the U.S. changes the structure of USD reserve status to a system with a neutral reserve asset that floats in all currencies, gold, the U.S.'s primary economic role in the world is to supply China the USDs to build ships, buy up hard assets around the world, etc. So this is, I think, reading below the surface on this, this is a signal to China that this whole way of doing things isn't going to last. So it's going to be in all of our interests to diminish the amount that we're spending on our militaries right now, in large part because the U.S. has a lot of military development catch-up that they need to do. So there's a protective aspect of this, a defensive aspect of this, and we need more nuclear power. So if we're going to really ramp up our nuclear power capacity, we're going to need some new sort of diplomatic arrangement around nuclear, which is going to be a basis for trade, I would imagine, related to energy. It's another thing that I think is implicated in all of this. But the biggest thing of all, I would say, is that this is a signal to Europe, again, that everyone else is ready to sort their shit out. Europe is the annoying kid at the playground that's pissing everyone off and can't get their shit together. And it's time for them to do so. And they need to pick a daddy. If they want to keep fighting Russia, fine, but they're going to be fighting Russia on their own. They're not going to be getting support to do it because there's no reason for it. There's no cause for it. And Trump is treating Putin and Xi with more diplomatic respect than he is the European leaders. He's explicitly said, we won't even meet with EU leaders because we don't think the EU is legitimate. Okay, so now let's see, do I want to, almost 3 hours here. I've got a couple more things I was going to read. Yeah, I'll just read both of them. So the first one is this article here, also on Unheard. Interesting piece by Yanis Varoufakis, who is an opponent of Trump's policies in general, but who nonetheless suspects that Trump has a more sophisticated understanding of global trade than most mainstream economists. me make sure that, okay. Donald Trump's economic master plan. He is plotting an anti-Nixon shock. Faced with President Trump's economic moves, his centrist critics oscillate between desperation and a touching faith that his tariff frenzy will fizzle out. They assume that Trump will huff and puff until reality exposes the emptiness of his economic rationale. They have not been paying attention. Trump's tariff fixation is part of a global economic plan that is solid, albeit inherently risky. Their thinking is hardwired onto a misconception of how capital, trade, and money move around the globe. Like the brewer who gets drunk on his own ale, centrists ended up believing their own propaganda, that we live in a world of competitive markets where money is neutral and prices adjust to balance the demand and supply of everything. The unsophisticated Trump is, in fact, far more sophisticated than them, and that he understands how raw economic power, not marginal productivity, decides who does what to whom, both domestically and internationally. Though we risk the abyss staring back when we attempt to gaze into Trump's mind, we do need a grasp of his thinking on three fundamental questions. Why does he believe that America is exploited by the rest of the world? What is his vision for a new international order in which America can be great again? How does he plan to bring it about? Only then can we produce a sensible critique of Trump's economic master plan. So why does the president believe America has been dealt a bad deal? His chief complaint is that dollar supremacy may confer huge powers on America's government and ruling class, but ultimately foreigners are using it in ways that guarantee U.S. decline. So what most consider to be America's exorbitant privilege, he sees as its exorbitant burden. Trump has been lamenting the decline of U.S. manufacturing for decades. Quote, if you don't have steel, you don't have a country. But why blame this on the dollar's global role? Because, Trump answers, foreign central banks do not let the dollar adjust downwards to the right level, at which U.S. exports recover and imports are restrained. It is not that foreign central bankers are conspiring against America. It absolutely is that foreign central bankers are conspiring against America. It is just that the dollar is the only safe international reserve they can get their hands on. It is only natural for European and Asian central banks to hoard the dollars that flow to Europe and Asia when Americans import things. By not swapping their stash of dollars for their own currencies, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, and the People's Bank of China, and the Bank of England suppress the demand for, and thus the value of, their currencies. This helps their own exporters boost their sales to America and earn even more dollars. In a never-ending circle, these fresh dollars accumulate in the coffers of the foreign central bankers who, to gain interest safely, use them to buy U.S. government debt. And there's the rub. According to Trump, America imports too much because it is a good global citizen which feels obliged to provide foreigners with the reserve dollar assets they need. In short, U.S. manufacturing has been in decline because America is a good Samaritan. Its workers and middle class suffer so that the rest of the world can grow at its expense. But the dollar's hegemonic status also underpins American exceptionalism, as Trump knows and appreciates. Foreign central banks' purchases of U.S. treasuries enable the U.S. government to run deficits and pay for an oversized military that would bankrupt any other country. And by being the linchpin of international payments, the hegemonic dollar enables the president to exercise the modern-day equivalent of gunboat diplomacy, to sanction at will any person or government. Now, I'll add here, it enables the president to do that, but it requires a president who will actually do that. And so far, Trump has been the only one who's even really dared to cross those lines. This is not enough in Trump's eyes to offset the suffering of American producers who are undercut by foreigners, whose central bankers exploit a service, dollar reserves, America provides them for free to keep the dollar overvalued. For Trump, America is undermining itself for the glory of geopolitical power and the opportunity to accumulate other people's profits. These imported riches benefit Wall Street and realtors, but only at the expense of the people who elected him twice. Americans in the heartlands who produce the manly goods, such as steel and automobiles, that a nation needs to remain viable. And that's not the worst of Trump's concerns. His nightmare is that this hegemony will be fleeting. Back in 1988, the greatest year, 1988, while promoting his Art of the Deal on Larry King and Oprah Winfrey, he bemoaned, quote, "We are a debtor nation. Something's going to happen over the next number of years in this country because you cannot keep on losing $200 billion a year." Since then, he has become increasingly convinced that a terrible tipping point is approaching. As America's output diminishes in relative terms, the global demand for the dollar rises faster than U.S. incomes. The dollar then has to appreciate even faster to keep up with the reserve needs of the rest of the world. This can't go on forever. For when U.S. deficits exceed some threshold, foreigners will panic. They will sell their dollar-denominated assets and find some other currency to hoard. Americans will be left amid international chaos with a wrecked manufacturing sector, derelict financial markets, and an insolvent government. This nightmare scenario has convinced Trump that he is on a mission to save America, that he has a duty to usher in a new international order. And that's the gist of his plan. To effect in 2025 a decisive anti-Nixon shock, a global shock that cancels out the work of his predecessor by terminating the Bretton Woods system in 1971, which spearheaded the era of financialization. Central to this new global order would be a cheaper dollar that remains the world's reserve currency. This would lower U.S. long-term borrowing rates even more. Can Trump have his cake, a hegemonic dollar in low-yielding U.S. treasuries, and eat it, a depreciated dollar? He knows that the markets will never deliver this of their own accord. Only foreign central banks can do this for him. But to agree to do this, they need to be shocked into action first. And that's where his tariffs come in. This is what his critics do not understand. They mistakenly think that he thinks that his tariffs will reduce America's trade deficit on their own. He knows they will not. Their utility comes from their capacity to shock foreign central bankers into reducing domestic interest rates. Consequently, the euro, the yen, and the renminbi will soften relative to the dollar. This will cancel out the price hikes of goods imported into the U.S. and leave the prices American consumers pay unaffected. The tariffed countries will be in effect paying for Trump's tariffs. But tariffs are only the first phase of his master plan. With high tariffs as the new default, and with foreign money accumulating in the Treasury, Trump can bide his time as friends and foes in Europe and Asia clamor to talk. That's when the second phase of Trump's plan kicks in, the grand negotiation. Unlike his predecessors from Carter to Biden, Trump disdains multilateral meetings and crowded negotiations. He is a one-on-one man. His ideal world is a hub and spokes model like a bicycle wheel, in which none of the individual spokes makes much of a difference to the functioning of the wheel. In this view of the world, Trump feels confident that he can deal with each spoke sequentially. With tariffs on the one hand and the threat of removing America's security shield or deploying it against them on the other, he feels he can get most countries to acquiesce. Acquiesce to what? To appreciating their currency substantially without liquidating their long-term dollar holding. He will not only expect each spoke to cut domestic interest rates, but will demand different things from different interlocutors. From Asian countries that currently hoard the most dollars, he will demand they sell a portion of their short-term dollar assets in exchange for their own, thus appreciating currency. From a relatively dollar-poor Eurozone riddled with internal divisions that increases negotiating power, Trump may demand three things. That they agree to swap their long-term bonds for ultra-long-term or possibly even perpetual ones, that they allow German manufacturing to migrate to America, and, naturally, that they buy a lot more US-made weapons. Can you picture Trump's smirk at the thought of this second phase of his master plan? When a foreign government acquiesces to his demands, he will have chalked up another victory. And when some recalcitrant government holds out, the tariffs stay put, yielding his treasury a steady stream of dollars which he can dispense with any way he deems fit, since Congress controls only tax revenues. Once this second phase of his plan is complete, the world will have been divided into two camps. One camp shielded by American security at the cost of an appreciated currency, the loss of manufacturing plants, and forced purchases of U.S. exports, including weapons. The other camp will be strategically closer perhaps to China and Russia, but still connected to the U.S. through reduced trade, which still gives the U.S. regular tariff income. Trump's vision of a desirable international economic order may be violently different from mine, but that gives none of us a license to underestimate its solidity and purpose, as most centrists do. Like all well-laid plans, this may, of course, go awry. The depreciation of the dollar may not be sufficient to cancel out the effect of tariffs on prices U.S. consumers pay. Or the sale of dollars may be too great to keep long-term U.S. debt yields low enough. But besides these manageable risks, the master plan will be tested on two political fronts. The first political threat to his master plan is domestic. If the trade deficit begins to shrink as planned, foreign private money will stop flooding Wall Street. Suddenly, Trump will have to betray either his own tribe of outraged financiers and realtors or the working class that elected him. It's weird he keeps saying realtors. I suppose maybe this is like, realtors might mean like real estate investors or like property magnates. Might be a translation thing. Meanwhile, a second front will be opening. Regarding all countries as spokes to his hub, Trump may soon discover that he has manufactured dissent abroad. Beijing may throw caution to the wind and turn the BRICS into a new Bretton Woods system in which the yuan plays the anchoring role that the dollar played in the original Bretton Woods. Perhaps this would be the most astonishing legacy and comeuppance of Trump's otherwise impressive plan. So, you've got a Euro guy who's recognized, he's like, hey, we need to actually take this guy seriously. I actually see where this is going now. And what does he default to as what he thinks would be a comeuppance? Would be the BRICS forming a new Bretton Woods system in which the yuan plays the anchoring role that the dollar played in the original Bretton Woods. So you can see the natural European instinct to move toward China. I don't think this is even possible. I don't think it's economically conceivable. But you can see Europe is going to have to pick a new daddy. And China seems to be the one that they are inclined to move toward, which is kind of funny seeing how much closer China and Russia have gotten and how that's not going to change anytime soon. So I think over the next couple of years, one of the big things that's going to be happening is essentially it's going to be a fight over Europe. Like who is going to get Europe as property? The Europeans are just going to have to put up with it because their alternative is, as Jason Miranchuk said in the chat yesterday, their alternative is basically being like Africa with better architecture. H.H. Blunt says, so in short, Trump will pull a Marshall Plan reverse Uno card. Europe will pay for America's reindustrialization. Yes. Now, this is a very interesting thread here from Matt Smith. No, Amy, not that Matt Smith. This is the Matt Smith that from the podcast with Doug Casey. So he says, the biggest economic shift in 50 plus years is happening right now. Nobody's talking about it, but if you're paying attention, the signs are clear. The US dollar is about to be deliberately devalued, and it will change everything. First, look at what's happening in the gold market. There's a massive run on gold. 30 million ounces have been moved just this year, 10% of the total US reserves. Someone, likely the Treasury or Fed, is buying it all without caring about price. This is not normal. Why does this matter? Gold has been the foundation of real money for centuries. Whenever there's monetary disorder, gold becomes critical. China has been preparing for this for years, buying gold hand over fist. Now the US is following suit. Something big is coming. The US dollar is too strong. It makes our exports uncompetitive. Countries like China and Japan have cheap currencies undercutting US industry. The Trump team sees this as currency manipulation, but they plan to flip the script. Here's how. The strategy? A massive, deliberate dollar devaluation. The goal is to make US goods cheaper globally. Tariffs and our security umbrella will force countries like China and Mexico to revalue their currencies. This hasn't been done since 1971 and 1985, the Plaza Accord, but it's coming back, and much bigger. They'll call it the Mar-a-Lago Accord. Inflation will skyrocket. Prices of everything will rise. The cost of living will explode. The hope is wages will explode along with expenses. The government wants this. Why? To inflate away debt and restart the system. This explains why the Sovereign Wealth Fund is coming. Trump's advisors want to monetize U.S. resources. This is what focusing on the asset side of the balance sheet is all about. Our gold stocks, but also oil, minerals, land, will all be used as financial assets directed in a new industrial policy. The government is shifting from spending-focused to asset-focused. So what happens next? Expect major capital controls to keep money from fleeing the U.S. Foreign holders of U.S. debt and perhaps even stocks could get hit with restrictions or fees. A two-tier dollar system may emerge, internal and external dollar. Who's been talking about this recently? You guys should be listening to Tom Luongo. He is on the cutting edge here. Believe it or not, the U.S. will be copying some of the Chinese economic model. Gold is rising for a reason. It's not that gold is going up, it's that the dollar is going down. Based on US-based money, gold should be $21,000 plus per ounce. We could get there. Gold is the signal, and the smart money is positioning now. What about the Fed? Trump's advisors want to kill the Fed. I think it will fade into the mist of history. What replaces it is likely to be a private stablecoin-backed system like Tether, a gold-backed digital dollar. He says CBDC. It won't be a CBDC, but a gold-backed digital dollar is coming. The entire monetary order is being reset. So what should you do? He says own hard assets, gold, land, and real assets. Reduce exposure to U.S. debt. Bonds will get crushed. Prepare for capital controls. Offshore options may get limited. Stay ahead of the shift because the old system is dead. Bottom line, they have a plan to create the biggest financial reset in 50 plus years. The dollar will be devalued. A whole new industrial policy will emerge. Inflation will go up, not down. It must for the U.S. to become competitive again. Gold and hard assets will soar. I explained the details with receipts in an interview earlier this week. The topic is complex. Watching this will help you understand and prepare. And there is a link here. Again, I will put this in the King Pilled Substack, kingpilled.substack.com. You can get this link and you can go watch that interview. Some sources to help you understand the plan. It's not mine. This is from Team Trump. A User's Guide to Restructuring the Global Trading System by Stephen Myran, who is, let me double check what his role was. Stephen Myran was just appointed as, let's see, he was an advisor of economic policy for the Treasury under Steve Mnuchin, and he is the chairman for the Council of Economic Advisors. He wrote this I don't know what you'd call it, a paper, A User's Guide to Restructuring the Global Trading System. Strongly recommend you read it. It's 41 pages. It's fairly dense, but it's quite good, and it's going to give you a real good insight into the way that the Trump team is thinking economically. So there's that, and then this here, I want to play a clip from this for you guys, and it may, it's on YouTube. We'll see how long we can get away with streaming this, but this is an October interview with Howard Lutnick, who is the Commerce Secretary nominee, and this is timestamped to his explaining how the Sovereign Wealth Fund will be used.
Let's talk about how do we make $1 trillion. If you give us a $500 trillion asset, can you make $1 trillion off of it? All right.
Hopefully.
I'm going to rename that famous department we just called it. We called it the Department of the Interior. Let's give it the real name. The Department of all the land and mineral rights of the United States of America. All the land and mineral rights. It used to be called the U.S. Naval Petroleum Reserve. Now it's called ANWR. 19 million acres off the coast of Alaska that has as much oil, slightly less oil than Saudi Arabia. And it's ours. If we pump that oil, who wants to buy that oil? Let me give you a hint. You know how much oil Korea has? None. And they're our ally. You know how much oil Germany has? They need it. They're our ally. If we sell oil, how about Japan? How much oil does Japan have? None. So it's in Alaska. You sell it to our allies. They become strategically important to us. They make a better trade deal with us. They thank God for America, right? And we make money. And you know what we do with that money? Reduce our deficit. We use our assets to make money. We have lithium mines. Mine it. Make money from the United States of America. Don't tax our people. Make money instead. Put tariffs on China and make $400 billion. Now let's go to the military. We spend $200 billion a year on R&D. Every year we spend $200 billion on R&D. We take the cool stuff that we invent and then we give it. Give, it's a great word, G-I-V-E. Give it to a military contractor who makes the thing we want, the plane or the missile or whatever we come up with that's totally friggin' cool. And then they sell it back to us at like a 50% margin. If we simply said to them, you have to give us back our $200 billion on the products, do you realize I just said $200 billion a year? So you'd say, all right, Howard, you got the interior that's probably like 150 billion. You have this 200 billion for R&D that if we make a zero return, we are We're now the dumbest investor in the history of the world. We spend $200 billion and we get our money back. That's $200 billion. Now we're in $300 billion to the plus, right? We're going to put tariffs. Donald Trump said his tariffs will be between $250 and $500 billion, right? And I spend time going on and on and on. You'd say, Howard, you have a view with Donald Trump to get to $1 trillion at the end of 4 years, don't you?
I think it can happen faster. I think
Thanks, pal.
Yeah, I think that. Well, here's
I say, I'll get to $1 trillion in 4 years, and you're like, I could do it faster.
No.
I'm not do it. I'm not even thought of it.
No, I'm not even the one who's saying that. Necessarily I could do it. What I think is the problem with doing it faster is that it's kind of what Elon faced at Twitter, right? Is he walks in the building and they have thousands of employees, and he says, "All right, I'm going to let some people go." And the second he lets anybody go, the rest of the employees outside of the 500 that are the stars start yelling and screaming. So he's got to make another cut. And what you find is that he's trying to turn the business around while fighting the people who are there because they're entrenched in the bureaucracy. They've got cushy jobs and all these issues. In hindsight, I think he reduced that staff by 80%.
Yeah, he did.
And the product is better today than it was before.
Yeah, it's at least the same, for sure.
And so if you were unencumbered and you were able to go in, God forbid we did a zero-based budget of the government, you could do it way faster. I think that you've got to say 4 years because they're going to fight you every second of the way.
But remember, there's two sides. There's the cost cutting, which is DOGE, right? And there's revenue production, which is Howard and the economic team. So we're going to have a Department of the Interior person who's going to be the Department of Land and Mines, and let's go make money, right? We have our tariffs. Let's go make money. We have our procurement. Let's go and use our R&D to make money. Right?
I think if I watch just enough to be dangerous, you talking, Trump talking, JD talking, a couple of others, is there a world where we can eliminate income tax in this country by using tariffs and other means to replace all that tax revenue?
Once upon a time in the land called America.
Don't do it.
We were the richest country on earth, right? The turn of the century. We had no income tax. We had tariffs. We have this great economy. You want to come play here? Pay. It's like joining Costco. He's got to pay to come in. It's the best place to be. You should pay to come in.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. I don't want to stream that for too much longer before it pulls the stream down. Strongly recommend you listen to this whole conversation. This is from 3 months ago. The latter half of it, he tells his story about surviving 9/11. Now, Lutnick is an interesting character. As Minoan points out here, Stormy makes a strong case for Lutnick being a Jay, but not part of the tribe. His mom wasn't a Jay, and when he was orphaned, the Jays abandoned him. This is very true. However, it came out during Scott Bessent's nomination hearing that one of Lutnick's ventures involved transitioning the settlement of U.S. treasuries to London to a clearinghouse that is overseen by the Bank of England. And Lutnick was knee deep in all of that. And Luongo has said that he's heard, and Luongo's, when he talked about what DOGE was going to do, he was bang on, and he's been bang on so far. So when he says that he hears people from the transition team telling him things, I'm inclined to take his word for it. He said that he's heard that Lutnick is not very popular among them. So right now, jury's out for me with Lutnick, whether he's actually trustworthy or not. Now, the sense I get is that even if he was central to this scheme that was essentially going to create a European end run around what the LIBOR to SOFR change affected, I get the sense for him it would be partly because of what Minoan's saying here, that from what Stormy said, that this isn't like Lutnick getting one for Israel. This is more about Lutnick getting one for Lutnick. That's the sense that I get from him. So like if he's a villain, he's a villain because he's trying to line his pockets, not because he's party to some great global conspiracy. However, everything that he's saying here the things he's saying here is why he was involved in the administration in the first place, why he is a candidate for Secretary of Commerce. Now, I also noticed that he said he's talking about Secretary of the Interior here, and from the sound of it, he wanted either Treasury or Interior, and he's winding up at Commerce. Doug Burgum is the Secretary of the Interior, and then Scott Bessent obviously is at Treasury. So it's possible that Lutnick ends up out on his ear. I don't know. But there's another interesting connection with him in that he's a massive investor in Tether. And here's a clip from Adam Curry talking about the role that Tether is likely going to play.
Now we get stable coins. This is a crazy thing that's happened. There's this. So a stable coin is a digital dollar. It's pegged to the dollar, so it's always a dollar. And you can pay with this through the internet, through apps and everything. It's already being used all over the world. The only reason it's worth $1 is because the stable coin company that creates it, they have debt and paper to back it up. So they buy America's debt. They get treasury bonds or T-bills, which actually pays a dividend, so you get interest on that. And for each dollar they have bought in treasuries, they can create a stable coin. So if you look at the company Tether, they have bought more of the United States debt than most countries. They have $160 billion worth of U.S. debt, and for each of those dollars, they've created a stable coin, which now people can use all over the world transacting.
Whoa.
And what's their business? There's like 50 people in the company. So they have
Let me look at this real quick here. Tether profits. So in 2024, Tether made $13 billion in profits, which puts it in the same company as Goldman Sachs. And what, let's see here, total Goldman Sachs employees. So Goldman Sachs, as of December 2023, had 45,300 employees, and Tether has like 50 or something like that, and they're just as profitable because this is their whole thing. Is they issue this stable coin, so they buy assets to back it, many of which are treasuries. They get the coupon payments from the treasuries, and they use that to buy Bitcoin, by and large. There's more than that, but that's the real skinny.
$160 billion at 4% interest annually. They're making bank just for holding this debt. So I think President is very smart, and he's seen that we can flood the world with our stable coin, and you kind of get a 2-for-1. So you create $1 of debt, but then you create another dollar on top that can be used all over the world as the reserve currency, and that should probably result in, I don't know, the Mar-a-Lago Accord or some new monetary system that we're going to have to come up with to really have our dollar be valuable.
Notice he said Mar-a-Lago Accord. That's directly from that paper, that Stephen Myron paper. Mar-a-Lago Accord. You keep track of that.
Valued properly, but also still remain the reserve currency and remain the strong export country that we need to be, because, what do? We don't make anything that we sell abroad. We can't all be, serving each other burgers and fries and washing each other's cars and cleaning each other's homes. We have to build something. And all of that went overseas. Everything we got, all of the stuff on this table. This, it didn't come out of his butt. This is from China. Although, I don't know. So there's something big coming, really big, and it has to happen. And Trump is a very meta guy. People misunderstand. He's going to refi the country. That's what he's a real estate guy. He's going to figure out a way to refi it, and it'll be digital. And a lot of the Bitcoiners don't like this because they like Bitcoin to be the money that the whole world uses. That may one day happen, but now it's more like the digital gold. You can keep your value in it, And, I can send $1 billion, if I had it, I could send $1 billion to another country, to another person in 10 minutes, and, no one can stop me. So it's a very useful tool, but it hasn't quite turned out to be money or currency the way it was originally intended. But it's going to be a very important part of it. I think you'll see Bitcoin be a part of that strategic reserve. It's easier than sending gold, than, I'm going to ship you $1 billion worth of gold. I need, armored cars, I need dudes, everything, security and ships and whatever. So it'll be a part of it, and you'll still be able to use it between people. But it looks to me like stablecoin, Tether in particular, is going to be the future of the U.S. dollar payments. And this is where a lot of people on the right, certainly, are very afraid of control grid, because a stable coin is not necessarily like Bitcoin. You can stop it, you can control it, you can see who sent what to whom. There's a lot of fear about this, and particularly, although I don't see any maliciousness, there's fear that Elon and the PayPal mafia and Peter Thiel, all guys you've met, all guys you've had on the show, I think are actually quite nice people, that they're going to bring in the new with AI, and we're all going to be locked in, and Stargate will bring cancer mRNA vaccines that'll be mandated. I mean, people are spinning up over this stuff. And I'm not saying that they're necessarily wrong or there should be no concern, but we are moving towards a digital dollar, and it will have aspects of control, which is why I like the backup of Bitcoin, so I can still transact and do things without anybody being able to stop it. And you're going to get none of that with a shit coin. Nothing. Promised.
I think that the point he makes here, like, you're not going to get away from a digital dollar. And honestly, people who are like, oh no, digital dollar, you already use digital dollars. Like, the fact that you can go get some paper out, the paper makes a difference. It's already a digital dollar. Now, there's a very interesting point that he made in here. And I was surprised. I didn't know that Adam Curry had it like this. I haven't listened to No Agenda in a while. But this here, flood the world with our stablecoin, we get a 2-for-1. We create a dollar of debt, and we create another dollar that can be used all over the world as a reserve currency. And that should result in some new monetary system that we need to come up with, but to have our dollar valued properly and remain the reserve currency and remain a strong export country. Now, as I was sitting here going back and forth with Grok, trying to wrap my mind around this and asking questions about it. So this is what did it say here? So in the context of the tweet, the 2-for-1 refers to a strategy involving the US dollar and stablecoins. Here's how the mechanics work. Creation of debt. First, the US government or entities like stablecoin issuers such as Tether purchase US debt in the form of treasury bonds or T-bills. This action essentially creates debt as the government is borrowing money. For each dollar's worth of this debt that is acquired, a corresponding amount of stablecoins can be issued. These stablecoins are digital representations of the US dollar pegged 1-to-1 to maintain their value equal to $1 US. That means for every dollar of debt held, there is a digital dollar created, which can be circulated. The 2-for-1 effect comes from the dual benefit this creates. Debt management. The U.S. manages its debt by having it backed by stablecoins, which are then in circulation, providing liquidity and potentially reducing the visible burden of the debt. These stablecoins can circulate globally, functioning as a digital version of the U.S. dollar. This increases the global presence and use of the U.S. dollar, reinforcing its status as the world's reserve currency without the need for physical currency distribution. The U.S. benefits economically because these stablecoins, while backed by debt, can be used in international transactions, trade, and as a store of value, similar to how the U.S. dollar is used today. This could lead to increased demand for U.S. debt as more stablecoins are needed, potentially lowering borrowing costs for the U.S. government. This is particularly the case, I'll add, as Bitcoin continues to grow. As the Bitcoin network continues to grow, the demand for Tether is going to continue to grow to facilitate a lot of these transactions, a lot of the Bitcoin transactions. And so if Tether is pegged 1-to-1 with the dollar, then essentially what could be created here is an offshore dollar that is Tether. Where Tether is effectively the offshore dollar, and then the onshore dollar is domestically circulating only. So the actual physical dollar only exists onshore. And I asked this, I said, does this mean the stablecoins could replace offshore dollars to maintain the reserve status of the dollar, while actual dollars themselves are kept on shore? And it said, yes, that's a reasonable interpretation based on the information provided in the tweet and related discussions. Here's how this concept would work. Stablecoins like Tether are pegged to the US dollar, effectively acting as digital representations of the dollar. They can be used globally for transactions, trade, yada, 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 similar to how physical US dollars are used. By circulating stablecoins internationally, the US could maintain and potentially enhance the dollar's reserve currency status. Stablecoins could be seen as an extension of the dollar's reach into the digital realm, where they are used for cross-border payments, investments, and as a reserve asset in digital wallets and financial systems around the world. Meanwhile, the actual physical dollars, or the reserves backing these stablecoins, like US Treasury bonds, remain onshore in the US financial system. This setup allows for the control and regulation of the monetary base within the US, while still benefiting from the global circulation of dollar-pegged digital assets. This arrangement could provide a transparent and regulated alternative to offshore dollars, where the US government or regulatory bodies can oversee the issuance and management of these stablecoins. It reduces the risk associated with offshore financial operations and helps in maintaining oversight over how the dollar is used globally. By focusing on stablecoins for international use, the U.S. can ensure that the benefits of the dollar's reserve status, like seigniorage, increased demand for U.S. debt, and economic influence are maintained, while the physical dollars or the equivalent reserves are kept within the U.S., potentially leading to better control over monetary policy and economic stability. And one of the things that paper written by Stephen Myron, one of the things that he talked about in there was essentially charging a fee, like an extra premium for offshore, for foreign purchases of U.S. debt. So paywalling U.S. debt even more. And then the other interesting point here, and this is where it's like stretching my brain to wrap around all the abstractions here. But just recently, Tether announced that going forward, they're going to be minting new USDT, new Tethers are going to be minted on the Lightning Network on Bitcoin. And so it says here, Tether's announcement about minting USDT, their stablecoin pegged to the US dollar, is significant for several reasons within the context of the discussion on stablecoins, US debt, and digital currency systems. The Lightning Network is a layer 2 scaling solution for Bitcoin that enables faster and cheaper transactions by allowing them to occur off the main Bitcoin blockchain. By integrating USDT with the Lightning Network, Tether can offer users the ability to transact with stablecoins that are backed by the US dollar, but with the speed and efficiency that Bitcoin's Lightning Network provides. This could significantly improve the usability of USDT for microtransactions, remittances, and other applications requiring quick settlement. And integrating USDT into the Bitcoin ecosystem through the Lightning Network could lead to broader adoption of stablecoins with Bitcoin's user base, which is one of the largest and most established in the crypto space. This move could potentially normalize the use of stablecoins within Bitcoin's infrastructure, blending the stability of dollar-pegged assets with the security and decentralization of Bitcoin. That's mostly, I think it's largely already happened, or is happening. But then, what was the other part here? So, thinking about the mechanics of this, Tether mints new USDT on the Lightning Network. When they do that, they buy I think they buy a lot of different assets to hold in reserves, but one of the largest ones is treasuries. So they're minting these on the Lightning Network. They're buying treasuries, and then the abstractions here start melting my brain. There's an integration that's happening here between you get Tether as basically being BTC backed. Tether is implicated in BTC transactions. The more the Bitcoin network grows, the more demand there is for Tether, which means the more US dollars you can have in circulation with the treasuries backing them, so more debt that can be issued. But all of it is it's creating this positive feedback loop, and I'm trying to figure out where it breaks in all of that. AJ Jablon says having BTC-backed Tether pegged to the dollar would be a backdoor to having, in effect, BTC-backed USD. Yes. And then you have a domestically circulating like domestically circulating Federal Reserve notes with a globally circulating BTC-backed tether that is boosting the balance sheet of the United States. It's increasing the debt that they can offer while also expanding their balance sheet, assuming that they have a strategic Bitcoin reserve as well. There was one other point in here, and then I'll let you guys go. 3.5 hours. I didn't expect to go this long, but hey, just leaning into it. Let's see. Okay, I said if all the above was put into place and then the United States established a large strategic Bitcoin reserve, then purchasers of U.S. debt would also be potentially expanding the U.S. balance sheet by increasing demand for USDT, correct? It says, yes, that's a correct interpretation. Let's break down the scenario. If the United States were to establish a large strategic reserve of Bitcoin, this would mean the government's holding a significant amount of Bitcoin, which could be seen as an asset in the national balance sheet. This action could enhance the perceived value of Bitcoin by providing a form of governmental backing or recognition, potentially increasing its demand. Purchasers of U.S. debt, like Treasury bonds or T-bills, would indirectly support the U.S. economy and financial stability since Tether is backed by such debt instruments. An increase in the demand for U.S. debt would also mean an increase in the reserves backing USDT. When more U.S. debt is purchased, it increases the liabilities on the U.S. balance sheet since debt is essentially a liability. However, in this scenario, the increase in demand for U.S. debt also indirectly supports the value and circulation of USDT, which is pegged to the U.S. dollar. This could be viewed as an expansion of the U.S. balance sheet because more U.S. debt issuance to back USDT means more liabilities for the U.S. government. The strategic Bitcoin reserve would be an asset potentially offsetting or complementing the liabilities from increased debt. And more USDT in circulation backed by U.S. debt could enhance the global use of the U.S. dollar, effectively increasing the U.S.'s influence over global finance, which could be seen as an intangible asset or benefit. By integrating USDT with the Bitcoin ecosystem through mechanisms like the Lightning Network and backing it with U.S. debt, there's a symbiotic relationship created. Purchasers of U.S. debt indirectly support the circulation of USDT, which is a digital representation of the dollar, potentially expanding the global reach of U.S. financial instruments. Meanwhile, the strategic Bitcoin reserve could provide a hedge against inflation or currency devaluation, adding another layer of financial strategy. So, in essence, if the U.S. were to implement such a strategy, it would mean that the demand for U.S. debt would not only finance government spending, but also indirectly support the digital dollar ecosystem, potentially enhancing the U.S. dollar's global reserve status through digital channels. The strategic Bitcoin reserve would add another dimension to this strategy, potentially increasing the demand for Bitcoin, which could indirectly benefit the U.S. through its reserve holdings. So, I think that was all from this. Sometimes it's hard to get the AI agent to actually answer the question you're trying to ask, and you can tell that there's still it's not a person for sure. Okay, I think that was all. So anyways, yeah, I hope all of that made sense. I'm going to link all of these things here in the description or in the King Pilled Substack, so you guys can go dig into it yourself. I strongly recommend reading that paper that was written by by Stephen Myron, knowing that he's going to be the chair for the Council of Economic Advisors for the president. It'll give you a good signal as to the direction that things are going. But when I tell you guys, the global financial system is going to get rearranged in ways that we can barely comprehend. I think, like, the income tax, U.S. income tax is going away is basically just a matter of course. There's going to be no reason for it because of this alternate sort of system that they're setting up, where you're effectively going to have a domestically circulating digital bearer asset that's backed by a combination of Bitcoin and US dollars and gold. And I'm sure that the one of the things also that the US is going to do is Powell trapped Christine Lagarde he pinned her at the top. When he was raising rates, he got her pinned at the top because she's buying long-term debt as fast as possible to try to bring down the long end of the U.S. yield curve. So she's buying a bunch of expensive long-term debt. Then he starts dropping interest rates again, and she's now stuck at the top. And I think that what we're going to start seeing is for over the next 18 months or so, as the new tariff regime gets established, and all of these other countries begin their debt situations get worse and worse, we start getting into the sovereign debt collapse, then the U.S. is going to start buying its debt back at a discount, because these other countries are going to be forced to offload. They're going to be forced to sell. Let me think here. They're going to be forced to sell to service the debt. They're going to need dollars, so they're going to have to sell off their dollar-denominated assets, and so they're going to wind up having to sell off some of these treasuries that they were wildly accumulating to try to manipulate the American interest rates. It's pretty masterful seeing how the U.S., the actual American sovereigntist financial influences have been navigating this extrication of the dollar and the U.S. financial system overall from this parasitic control that overseas banks have had over it. I've never felt dumber than when I try to wrap my head around all of this. All right, let me catch up on the last few comments here, and then I will let you guys go. My bladder is going to explode. Another $10 super chat from Andrew Starr. Thank you, man. He says, new is scary, but we need change. I think we can all agree on that. Goated stream, Matt. White pills abound. I don't want it to end. Well, thank you, man. It's going to have to end because my bladder won't take it. But as my wife says, join the Discord where the white pills never end. Andrew Starr says, someone buys $1 of debt from the government, then turns the dollar into a digital-backed currency, thus creating a 2-for-1 effect. Yes. And Gaga is in the chat. My sweet mother-in-law. She says, my grandfather born 1904 and my father born 1924 would not even be able to comprehend any of this. It's so cool and mind-blowing. Thank you, Gaga. I love you. It was good to see you earlier today. Skippy says, best astrolabe of this week. Well, good. I'm glad. I'm glad it was worthwhile. I appreciate all the generosity. I think this might have been the best super chat day that I've ever had. You guys are the real MVPs. So, with all of that being said, make sure you like the stream. We're at 122. Make sure you like the stream, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that stuff. There is a podcast version of it as well. If you prefer to get these in audio format, then go to your favorite podcatcher. If you're there, subscribe and leave me a 5-star rating and review. Help me with the algorithm there as well. And then go join the Kingpill Discord, kingpill.com. That is the place to be. And for now, I will leave you guys. I'll see you again on Monday, last one of the week. So I'll see you again on Monday. And for now, I give you Hulk.
When they took a shot at my hero, and they tried to kill the next president of the United States, enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania make America